Tendai Mwari. Garvey lives.
Garvey lives.
Mosiah lives.
Mosiah lives.
Mosiah lives.
Tendai Mwari, sisters and brothers, welcome to our Mosiah session. Week 3, brothers and sisters, this is the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement, and this is part of our 31 days of observance of the life and the legacy of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Mwari, O Jah of our creation. Tendai Mwari. Tendai Mwari, for those listeners that are unfamiliar, means be thankful unto the Creator, giving thanks to the all creative forces of the universe for being here today. In the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement, we open speech, we close speech with the words Tendai Mwari. Yes, sisters and brothers, I will also take this opportunity to give respect and honor to the spiritual leader of the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement, Brother Leader Bandaka, who gave us this month Mosiah, where in the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement, we realized that Papa Garvey's name was not being celebrated. People were forgetting who Papa Garvey was, who he is. And so we felt that the only way we could do that was to institutionalize events and activities around his name. And we've been doing that for over, give me the figures, Brother Olatunji.
Sorry, say that again.
22 years.
22 years.
Okay, 22 years. 22 years as Mosiah, but we've been honoring Papa Garvey's name and legacy and celebrating around his name for probably over 30 years. So we give thanks and praises for that. Yes, sisters and brothers, also once again another brilliant session that we're looking forward to. So those of you that have logged in just now, let me just give you a few little explanation of the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement, just to say that obviously since the pandemic, we have some of our programs have not been in operation, and even prior to that, some of our programs not been in operation, in particular our Saturday school. So our Saturday school is online presently, and Alkebu-Lan Academy online, and we every Saturday from 10 o'clock, to 11:30, 12, approximately that time. And it's so great to see, students from all over the African world, logged in to that program. We also, brothers and sisters, have organized a food relief for our elders primarily, and our families, that may be, feeling some kind of hardship in this particular time, vulnerable families. We organize food parcels every Wednesday and, drop them off at their house with the help of volunteers. So we give thanks and praises for that. And, we continue to build on the work that we have institutionalized as a movement, and we intend to grow. But this month is a special month. Yesterday, we observed the life and the legacy of Papa Garvey. Every year, we have a special libation for Papa Garvey and his particular lineage. And we share his works, give it life, give expression to his words. The children share as well. It was just really beautiful yesterday, especially in a time like this where people have been allowed to actually reflect a bit more, reflect on their lives and, what they have been doing with their life and what faces us as a people if we don't organize. Papa Garvey warned us over 100 years ago, organize now or perish. And we're observing 100 years of the convention, the Black People's Convention of the World, of the African world, where over 25,000 people attended Madison Square Gardens in New York. 100,000 were part of the parade. So brothers and sisters, can you see that power? Can you feel the power, the potential of our power? Because that's what we have, the potential of being powerful once again. And it's all a matter of mind and spirit. Once we get our mind and our spirit intact, our body will do the rest. So brothers and sisters, we continue to do our work, and we hail organizations like the Pan-African Congress Movement, who came before us in the UK, laid the foundation for introducing us to Papa Garvey and the liberation fight. We give thanks and praises also to Rastafari in particular, who has kept the name of Papa Garvey alive, but not just keeping his name alive, but elevated him to a prophet. And we continue in that same via, brothers and sisters. So we give thanks and praises for those that continue in this fight all over the African world, who are honoring Papa Garvey right now, the UNIA-ACL, and the African Federation, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Uhura, all those brothers and sisters, all those organizations, Afrocentricity UK, International, in UK and around the world, who are honoring Papa Garvey's name and raising the banner of the red, the black, and the green. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari.
In the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, we have our daily affirmations, 31 days of observance, prophetic utterances from Papa Garvey himself, and 31 memory verses for our children. This is day 18, and I will read the affirmation and commentaries by the spiritual leader of the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, Brother Leader Bandaka. Put your race first. In a world of wolves, one should go armed, and one of the most powerful defensive weapons within the reach of African people is a practice of race first. Yes, put your race first in all parts of the world. Put your race first like all other races do. Tendai Mwari. Such is the wisdom of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Say, hail to the power of the word.
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 Yes, sisters and brothers, Papa Garvey's word, put your race first. We have commentaries by the spiritual leader, Brother Leader Bandaka, and I will proceed. It is considered intolerable, even racist, by many of our people for us to think or talk in terms of race. They must be reminded, however, that race is not our word. Neither is racism our deed. We are the victims of racism, not for the last 500 years, but over 2,000 years. We have been worried about AIDS for the past 2 decades because of its deadly impact, yet the worst genocidal epidemic of the past 2 millennia have gave birth to AIDS. We are told to forget. This spells neither logic nor intelligence, but the most eminent prophet one has spoken, and we have heard his call, and we will obey him and will put our race first. Tendai Mwari. Such is the wisdom of our spiritual leader, Brother Leader Bandaka. Say, hail to the power of the word.
Hail to the power of the
Hail
word.
to the power of the word. Hail to the power of the word.
Hail to the power of the word.
Tendai Mwari. Yes, sisters and brothers, we give thanks and praises to those prophetic utterances. This afternoon for some and evening for others, the session will be hosted by our senior pioneer, Brother Olatunji Heru, who will host this session. We also have our guest this afternoon, Brother Abiola Sow. And I will leave that to Brother Olatunji to take us forward. So I'm going to hand over to Brother Olatunji. Tendai Mwari, Brother Olatunji.
Tendai Mwari, Sister Kai, and Tendai Mwari to the entire African family tuned in this evening, here and now. Garvey lives.
Garvey lives.
Mosiah lives.
Mosiah lives.
I want to give thanks for the gathered strong here in cyberspace, sisters and brothers, that are tuned in right now to this hour. Also, so we started Mosiah 22 years ago, but this is technically our 23rd Mosiah observance in the community. If we start in 1998, this is the 23rd year we've been doing it. I want to give thanks to sisters and brothers this year, the year that we call, in alignment with our Kemetic calendar, 6260, not 2020, 6260. We've been going strong since the second day of Mosiah, sisters and brothers, this year with an opening ceremony on the second of Mosiah. We've had various sessions on Africa Speaks on Galaxy Radio, the only de-brainwashing station. And we've had sessions here online. On the first one we had was featuring our brother Ifayomi Grant. Last Sabbath we had our dear sister Kai, who's here with us right now, as well as the powerful warrior Mambo Amamazama, dealing with feminism versus African nationalist womanhood. And so we're here tonight, sisters and brothers, to deal with the fight against neo-colonialism with our brother Abiola Sow from Nation Kamit. But I'll introduce my brother more fully in a moment. Just going to give a shout out to any of those sisters and brothers who tuned into our show last night, Africa Speaks, where we spoke to and grounded with Chief Fode Mansarai and Sister Kenya Mansarai from the Black Star Action Network International, based there in Sierra Leone. So this is a global fight, sisters and brothers. This is Garveyism in practice. They're talking about the work they're doing on the ground in terms of agriculture, in terms of social welfare, in terms of health. This is what we're trying to do, sisters and brothers. There is a saying that we don't have any permanent friends with permanent interests, but we need to ensure that our interests amongst our people are global and local. So those interests we need to ensure that we do. Tonight's subject is timely because a lot of us are focused on Zimbabwe right now and what's going on there and the apparent capitulation of the government to the white supremacist power structure. We need to be clear, though, that Zimbabwe's adversaries are organized globally. The NDC in that country euphemistically called it the international community. What they really meant was Euro-America, Europe, European Union, America, Canada, Australia, etc. They're organized, and they organize their agenda on the relatively small country in African terms of Zimbabwe. That's the context we need to look at the situation in Zimbabwe, sisters and brothers, that there's a war being waged for decades on that country. And Africa as a whole wasn't resisting that war. Zimbabwe oftentimes was left to resist that war on its own. So we look at that. But we speak this evening about neo-colonialism. And we look to the likes of the Asajifo Kwame Nkrumah, who gave us that term. He may not originate it, but certainly gave us the term in an African context in his 1965 book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism. So look at that. That was still supposed to be the African decade, the 1960s. And halfway through that decade, and even before his untimely ousting, he was talking about neocolonialism as being a scourge on the African continent, as being something that would undermine the liberation agenda that we tried to bring forth, and certainly he tried to initiate in Ghana from 1957. So we're going to go into the situation, sisters and brothers. And our brother Abiola is a very serious activist that we had the pleasure of grounding with first a few years ago. He's from an organization called Nation Kamit. Brother Abiola is a Pan-Africanist from the Ivory Coast, but he lives in France, member of Nation Kamit, a Pan-Africanist organization which started in France in 2014. Nation Kamit focuses on Afrocentric spirituality, education, and economy. It's a brotherhood and sisterhood of Africans from the continent and the diaspora who emphasize and affirm that Pan-Africanism, or perhaps more appropriately, Revolutionary Kamitism, is the only solution to change the miserable plight of Africans around the world and achieve the African Renaissance. The objective of Nation Kamit, no less, is to re-establish Africa as the first world power in all fields. That is our agenda, sisters and brothers, and that is the agenda certainly of Nation Kamit. So I'm going to, without further ado, hand over to our brother Abiola Sow, who's going to deliver to us this evening our message, the war against neo-colonialism. Sisters and brothers, wherever you are, let us hail our brother and give him some strong vibrations to bring us this message this evening. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. I'm very honored today to have this opportunity to speak about that topic. I will try to share my screen so I can present some pictures along the way. So I will do that. Share screen. So let me know if you are able to see my screen right now.
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's right there. Yes, brother.
All right, great. Thank you. So, greeting, brothers and sisters, wherever you are. So today we will talk about neocolonialism in the African world, its dramatic effect it has on our people.
Sorry, brother Abiola. Sorry, brother Abiola. Yeah. Feel free to keep your camera on, yeah, because they can see you also. All right, so feel free to keep your camera on. All right.
Okay. So let's go. Can you see me?
You can see you, but
okay. So okay, can you hear me also? I think there is a bit of echo. I don't know if it's on my side or yours.
So that was brother Ola.
Okay,
yeah, it's fine now.
Okay, perfect. So today we'll talk about neocolonialism and its dramatic effects it has on our people. And before diving into today's topic, I wanted to call upon the name of our great ancestor, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, His Excellency. And what I wanted to say is that, Papa Garvey, your vision and your work has not been in vain. You have many daughters and sons who are continuing the work, who are still committed. And I think that it's inevitable that we will be not hundreds, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but one day we'll be 1 billion strong. We'll be 1 billion strong. And that is the way you saw it, and that is also the way we see it, and it has to come because it is necessary. We have seen the recent news in Zimbabwe. We are seeing the situation in Libya. We are seeing the situation in Mali. We are seeing the situation in Ivory Coast, in Haiti, everywhere around the world where there are Black peoples, where there are African people. There is suffering, there is degradation, and this is the state of affairs that you wanted us to be free from. So we are continuing this fight today. The vision you have was a vision of an African empire that will be so powerful that every African around the world, be it on the continent or abroad, will be empowered, will be lifted, will be respected, and will command respect everywhere it will be or she will be working. So this vision is not fully realized yet. We are even very far away from realizing it, but your message is still alive. And I think this generation has a specific duty to get back this vision and implement it and make it a reality. So as Frantz Fanon said, every generation has the right, the duty to discover his mandate and fulfill it or betray it. So I don't want our generation to be one of betrayers. So let's start today. I wanted also, before starting, to thank the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement, and I'm very happy to work with Alkebu-Lan, and I think this is one of our most serious organizations. We have been at work for many decades now, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, and that is something that is very rare in our organization. So I think that is something that need to be mentioned and commented. So I had the opportunity to present on this very topic of neocolonialism a few weeks ago with Brother Shakara, and today I will share the same breakdown of how neocolonialism works, but I want to also link it a bit more with the words of Papa and His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey in this month of Mosiah. And I think Garvey didn't talk specifically about neocolonialism in its word, but when you read his work, it is clear that it was a situation that he was already envisioning. It was a situation that it was already seeing coming. And if there is one thing that I will like to remember, if there is one thing that I will like to have with me every day in my mind, is this quote: "The only protection against injustice remains in power, physical, financial, and scientific." So this vision of the United States of Africa that it has, he was not talking about this specific term, he was more talking about an empire, a global Black empire. And it is in this quote that we have the core of this vision. The only protection against injustice remains in power, physical, financial, and scientific. So what is neocolonialism? Neocolonialism is injustice, basically. It's widespread injustice in our world. And it is a system that is put in place by foreign powers with the help of local agents that we will call presidents or governors or generals. But basically, they are stooges of the neocolonialist system, and they are working to enrich the foreign powers that put them in place into power. So today we have in Africa around 54 countries. So here on the map, you can see the different flags. So we have everything. We have the flags, we have national anthems, we have soccer teams, everything that looks like independent countries. But in reality, none of these countries are independent, and they are very tied and bound to the neocolonial system. So it means that wherever we are in Africa or abroad, our government policy doesn't really matter, and nothing is decided on the ground. Either the local politics, the economy, the health system, the education system, everything has been decided by the foreign powers, and our president, our governments are just applying these receipts that have been written abroad. So how does it work exactly? So one thing we have today is that we have the experience of the past. So the idea here is that in the future, we shouldn't be making the same mistakes. So we have to learn from our elders and ancestors who had the challenge of confronting neocolonialism first. So I will start with a quote of Kwame Nkrumah, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, in this book, Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. And he said, the essence of neocolonialism is that the state which is subject to it is in theory independent and has all the outward trappings of international sovereignty. In reality, its economic system and thus its political policy is directed from outside. Obviously, the goal of a neocolonial power is to enrich itself and exploit its neocolonial properties. And that is why we have countries that look independent, but are not really independent, and they are actually governed by foreign interests. So now that we have a basic understanding of what is neocolonialism, let's go a little bit into details about how it works on the ground. So there are many aspects of neocolonialism, and I will just focus on what I think are the most important for us to understand and to discuss. So the different aspects we'll be talking about are hiding the fact that neocolonialism is not something that we see every day it operates in the shadows. Second is that neocolonialism needs puppets to operate. So that is why we have presidents that are presided instead of presiding things. And those presidents, those governors, these elites are actually created by foreign powers and put in place and functions as puppets. The third principle is the brainwashing that is in place to ensure that there is a large group of people that are there and that are convinced that they need to follow the policy of the neo-colonialist powers. They are convinced, not only convinced, but they have also interest in doing so. So this brainwashing operates as in many levels, and we will examine them one by one. The fourth principle is stealing. So as we said, the goal is to exploit, and the last principle is killing, because in last resort, that is what those foreign powers will do. So let's start with the hiding. We will start with a quote from Kwame Nkrumah again. He said, "Neocolonialism is also the worst form of imperialism. For those who practice it, it means power without responsibility. And for those who suffer from it, it means exploitation without redress. In the neocolonialist territories, since the former colonial power has, in theory, relinquished political control, if the social conditions occasioned by neocolonialism cause a revolt, the local neocolonialist government can be sacrificed and another equally subservient one substituted in its place." So in contrast with what was done before, where we had the colonial armies in our countries visibly operating, now the idea is that we will have governments who will be officially elected by the people, but in reality will do the work of those foreign powers. So the foreign powers can always deny any responsibility and say that, oh, the African countries, they have been independent for so long, they have been independent for 60 years and they are still complaining, but they are the one in charge, so they can only blame themselves. In reality, we know that it's not true, because the leaders that we have been put in place and have been propped up by those foreign powers. So this hiding is very important, because it also confuses our people who don't see the real enemy. So we can change a man because we think it's a dictator, but we are not really changing the system. So the next one will replace the so-called dictator is even worse. So this is one thing that we really have to keep in mind, is that neocolonialism is hidden. So let's look, for example, at, so what I wanted to say with this picture is that in a neocolonialist country, really, the neocolonialist system is like a scaffolding. So it's like when you have a building, there is a scaffolding that you don't really see in general, and you see the paints, etc. But there is really a structure, a foundation behind it that is not visible, but that is the basis of the system. And our neocolonial countries are like that. They are founded on the basis of neocolonialism. And that is why we have all these problems. If we look at a country like Haiti, this is the situation we have, is that people are always on the streets. There are always protests. And from times to times, the protests are effective and the government changes, but the situation, the conditions of the people doesn't change, never changes. So that is what we have today. So we will say, oh, this is the fault of the Haitian people, but we have to remember that we had a president, for example, like Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who has simply been kidnapped by foreign forces, by the US, and abducted and replaced by another guy. So how can you be independent when your president can be kidnapped simply in open view. Everyone who had seen it is just not plausible. It's not a plausible independence. It's just a fake independence. So those are the puppets. We have to keep that in mind every time that we see a president or a government acting really strangely, acted against the interest of the people, is that this government has not really been elected by the people. They are just simply puppets. And there is this saying that the revolution will not be televised. And when we have neocolonialism, it's always and usually not televised. We have to look deeper to see the underpinnings of the system. So I talk about this fact that those governments that we have are really puppets. And one example that I can give is the case of the French-speaking countries in Africa, the former and French colonies and the current French neo-colonies. There was a guy called General de Gaulle who is a very famous French president, and he said that he didn't want at the independence time to lose his colonies, but he understood that he had to give some space so the system didn't break. And what he did is he created a system where they will select the different presidents that will be put into place and ensure that those presidents will do their bidings. And he named a guy whose nickname, so this is this guy, his nickname was Mr. Africa, because in the French presidency, there is a cell, a special office called the African office, the African cell of the French presidency. And this guy was nicknamed Mr. Africa, and his real name was Jacques Foccart. And he was like the first really master of this office, of this African office of the French presidency. And he basically oversaw every coup that went on in Africa. He was also very active in funding the rebels in Nigeria when there was the Biafra War, and he was funneling arms through Côte d'Ivoire via another puppet, Félix Houphouët-Boigny, the president of Côte d'Ivoire, that they put in place. So this guy, Jacques Foccart, was really the mastermind behind a lot of killings in Africa. And of course, he was the one doing the selection of who will be the next president in Central Africa, in Côte d'Ivoire, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, etc. So we have to remind ourselves that the system is very refined, and we have to know the names of the people who are in charge. So let's move on. This was an example from France, but we know that there are many other examples from UK, from the US, for example. And I wanted also to tell you about one anecdote, is that there is this country called Central Africa, and it's, as the names indicates, at the center of Africa. And the first president, actually he was prime minister, was called Barthélemy Boganda, and he was kind of a Pan-Africanist. And what he wanted to have at independence a federation of all, in quote, Latin-speaking countries in Africa. So it would have been like a federation of Central Africa. And obviously, predictably, he was killed in a plane crash, I think, mysteriously, and he has been replaced by a guy named David Dacko, who was a clown selected by France. And David Dacko then had been replaced by another clown called Jean Bedel Bokassa. And Jean Bedel Bokassa was one of the worst that we had, the worst of those presidents that France put in place. And it was so bad that when he went to France for state visits, official visits, he used to call General de Gaulle, he used to call him Daddy. And even General de Gaulle was not fan of this kind of thing. And Jean Bedel Bokassa kept insisting, calling him Daddy. And it's such a joke. And it's not even a sugar daddy, you see, because at least they will have some merits to doing that. But we were the one providing the resources and the money and the gold and the diamond to France, and we were still calling them daddy. So this kind of puppets, there is a whole system that is in place to create them and to ensure that the African countries don't progress, basically. I will just go back to this quote. So it is a quote by Cheikh Anta Diop about the systems of creating puppets. It said, "The imperialists in Africa are giving up a little ballast so as to cause a delay in the awareness of the people. Correlatively, they take advantage of this delay to reorganize their colonial system on definitive basis. They have the technical and scientific means at the present time and can ensure that in 20 years, African will forever lose all chances of becoming masters at home. They think that the best way to achieve this result is to transform the African intelligentsia, which could have played a revolutionary role, into a bourgeoisie whose class interests will henceforth coincide with those of the occupier." So also an elder like Cheikh Anta Diop was able to see the system coming into place, the system of putting puppets in charge of our countries. So these puppets are numerous, and they are in almost all spheres of activities. And of course, the most important are the economic spheres and the security spheres, the defense. So on the defense side, we have, for example, in France, a school called Saint-Cyr, is like the West Point of France. And basically every officer of an African French-speaking country will go there and get trained there and get and graduate there, and he will make a lot of friends, of French friends in the different security services, and get identified. He will get his file, and when he get back to his country, it will be ready to do anything that the motherland, neo-colonialist motherland, will tell him to do. So the system is very sophisticated, and basically all the militaries that we have are all trained abroad, and there are a lot of people who are just agents of the neo-colonialist powers. Same thing in the economic spheres. So here we have the current president of Ivory Coast, of Côte d'Ivoire. So at the left of this picture, we have President Alassane Dramane Ouattara, and it was at the time where he was at IMF, so the International Monetary Fund. And of course, it was high. It was high in the hierarchy, and those kind of people are very committed to the vision of the neo-colonialist powers, and they have been trained. And when we have someone like those people at the helm of a country, you can't wonder why the country doesn't progress, why the country is going backwards and is favoring the interest of foreign powers instead of the interest of its own people. So let's move on to another puppet. For example, we have President Macky Sall of Senegal, who said that the French were very good friends of the African people, because at least of the Senegalese people, because during World War I, while the other African soldiers didn't have deserts, the Senegalese one did get some deserts. So it's a proof that the French were really good to the Senegalese people. So that is the level of president that we have. So here, this is a clip of the president of Haiti. For a few years, he was called Sweet Mickey. So his real name is Michel Martelly. And this guy has been elected, of course, not by the Haitian, really, by the foreign powers, especially the United States, to direct the country and to run the country into the ground. So why do we keep having those puppets at the head of our states? And why are we putting up with them? Why there is not a more widespread a consciousness, awareness of that problem? It's because most of people have been brainwashed, have been zombified, and we are just running to the ground with our leaders, our so-called leaders. So this whole system of zombification is in place via many ways, but the most important ones are the schools and the religion, of course. So we'll look at a few of them to examine this other aspect of neocolonialism. So this is really zombification, is that you have someone who is acting against its own interest, is acting in a self-destructing manner, and is not even aware of it. And that is the state of African people right now, everywhere we are. So this is really a state of zombification. So when we look at the map here, we can see that this is the map of official language in Africa. So you can see that we have Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, mostly. And this is the only continent where you can see that, where the official languages everywhere are foreign languages. And this is the kind of stuff that is so destructive that will block any people from really progressing. There is no instance of a people who have been able to raise itself and to be strong, to get stronger, and to reach a strong country status by using a foreign language. There is just no instance of that. And in Africa, we are just doing something completely crazy, you see. So all those countries have foreign languages as their official languages. And the thing that happened is that there is a few people at the top, the elites, who really understand the languages. It's the language that is used in the parliament, that is used in TV, that is used in all the high spheres of activity. And most of the people don't really understand and master the language. So that is one thing that we have today in Africa, this zombification using the language. So when you talk with African people in the street, they will tell you, oh, it's normal because we need those language, we need French, we need English in order to communicate with other people in the world, in order to increase trade. We really need those language. But this is crazy because first, a function of a language is not to communicate with other people. The first function of a national language is to communicate with your own people first. And second, even countries like Iceland, Finland, who are really tiny countries, have their own language as official language, and they are no more isolated than all these African countries that we see on the map. So this is really a program of zombification, so Africans forget their languages and just run toward the ground. Let's continue with another aspect of this language thing, is that there are several organizations that have been created to strengthen the system. So here we have an organization called Francophonie, which is the French one. So it has been created to promote the use of the French language. But what we can see is that most of the people who are concerned, who are targeted, are African. You see there is a big concentration of African-speaking countries, of French-speaking countries in Africa. And today, the most populous French-speaking countries is officially is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So we are really the one making French an international language, you see. So we are very generous and we give power to other people instead of strengthening ourselves. That's, of course, crazy. We have also here a picture of Queen Elizabeth in Jamaica, because she is still the head of state of Jamaica. She's Queen of Jamaica. And this is, of course, things that zombified people will do. Another level of this zombification is religion. You see, so of course it is one of the most powerful, it's one of the most difficult, because it's a very touchy subject. People are really really sensitive about this topic, but we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it in a responsible way, but it's really important because of foreign religions, we are doing stuff that are against our interest and that are nonsensical. So here is a picture of a man called Nanfo Ismail Diaby. He's an imam in Ghana, Conakry, and he had one idea. He wondered, why are we speaking in Arabic? Why are we praying in Arabic when most of the people in Ghana don't understand Arabic? So let's at least try to pray in our local language, and it will be better. People will be able to understand what they are praying, what they are saying when they are praying. And he started this initiative, and the result is that his house has been destroyed. It has been impeached. It has been forbidden to preach, and now his security, his life, and the livelihood of his family is at risk. So that is really crazy. The only thing that he was asking, he was just trying to pray in an African language as a result. So you can see how this is a destructive program that we have in our brain to do things that are against our interests. That is, of course, zombification. One of the other levels of this program of brainwashing and is the school system. We don't really have a school system. We have a factory that is pumping out brainwashed people. We have zombie factories everywhere. So this is normal because originally the system had been designed that way. So here is one of the first school in Senegal, and originally it was called the School of the Hostage, because it has been created to take children from the nobility, so the children of the chiefs. The colonial power will take them, kidnap them, put them there, and try to indoctrinate them, try to brainwash them into becoming agents of France. So that is one of the instance, one of the example that shows how the school system that we have in Africa has been designed to create puppets and zombies people, basically. Here we have a picture of a queen, and Date Yala Mbodj, who was a queen in Senegal, and who put up a lot of resistance against the French occupation. And she was ultimately defeated by Louis Faidherbe, a colonialist, a French colonialist. And her son, Sidia Diop, was taken into an hostage situation in this school of hostage. And fortunately, even after it was rebaptized by Faidherbe as Léon, to give him a French name, to try to make him a French agent, Sidia Diop has been able to get back to his Africanity and restart the war of resistance against the French. So that was an instance where the system failed to zombify an individual, but the problem is that, of course, on the large scale, this program of zombification really succeeded. So we have, for example, one of the products of this program of zombification. It is the man of the left. It's called Léopold Sédar Senghor. He was a ferocious opponent of Cheikh Anta Diop, and he was basically a French man in his head, and he was leading Senegal he has been leading Senegal for many decades, and he finished his life in France after retiring from the presidency, and he died in France, in Normandy, with his French wife. So this is the kind of president that the French school system was really designed to create, and the objective clearly was achieved. So that is the brainwashing part of the neo-colonialist system. So you can see that it's very effective because it's not only in Senegal, it's really the same way that it operates in every of our countries, be it in Burkina Faso, in Ivory Coast, in the Congo, in Haiti, in Jamaica. It's the same everywhere. So now let's go to one of the last parts of this breakdown of neocolonialism. It's about the stealing. So as we said, the objective, the goal of the neocolonialist powers is really to exploit the resources and the people of the countries that are under the yoke. And that is the situation in Africa today. All our resources are exploited by others, and the governments that we have been put in place to facilitate that process. And it's very worrisome because this has been now going on for decades. And what will happen in 20, 30, 40 years when the resources will have been exhausted? That is a very serious question that we have to ask, because we are often saying that Africa is rich, we have a lot of natural resources, but the fact is we are not the one consuming them, we are not the one using them, and they are finite resources. So what will happen when those neo-colonialist powers will consume everything that we have, because that is what they have done on their soil. In Europe, there is nothing else to consume, so that is why they are going into other continents, and that is why also now China doesn't have enough resources for its growth process, and is going into Africa to take more resources. So what will happen when we won't have any more resources to use, because we'll have been giving them to everyone? Actually, we are not giving them, they are taking them. So that is a difference. So one of these system of stealing is, of course, I think already now a lot of people are aware of that system, is the franc CFA. So it's the monetary system that has been put into place by France in its former colonies. And it's a currency that is controlled by France, and that forces those countries to put half of the resources in the French treasury. And this is a system that is created basically to ensure that France controls economically those countries, that France can get capital, can get resources extracted from these countries, and that these countries will basically remain poor for a long time. So people are now getting angry about that issue, and people are reacting, and there is a big movement now organizing to break down, to take down the system. And France is reacting, and they have announced a new currency called the ECO that will be replacing the franc CFA system, but it's more of the same. So basically, it's just a cosmetic change. It's a rebranding, basically. Nothing really changed. So I just wanted to mention this book about an economist from Cameroon called Joseph Chudang-Pwemi that explained that it's not just the franc CFA system that is a problem, is that basically all of our countries are under monetary repression. That is how he called that. It is the fact that we are using money, basically, the way our masters are telling us to use money. So our masters, the neo-colonial powers and the instruments, the instruments like the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, and the army of economists that are pushing those kind of ideas to our countries. So all our countries, even when they are not in the franc CFA system, are still repressed. So we can touch about that maybe in the discussion. Don't have enough time to expand on it right now. The other part of the system is the debt system. So here you can see that there is a growing presence of China in Africa on the debt level. So a lot of people are now borrowing from China, but the debt system is also really designed to enslave those countries and ensure that they won't be able to get free, because first, the loans that are given to governments that have been put in place by force by the foreign powers. So they know they have put bad people in power. They know they have put corrupt people in power. So what will happen? Obviously, the money will get stolen. So that is the first point. The second point is that those loans are usually comes with conditions, and the conditions are that they need to be spent by buying stuff, services, and goods from the lending country. So the money comes back. So it's not really an aid. It's really most of an investment, much more an investment. And secondly, the loans themselves are designed to not be reimbursed. Basically, the country won't be able to reimburse them. So, for example, they will make loans to build roads. They will give loans to build hospitals. But how can you reimburse a loan by building an hospital? It doesn't make sense. The hospital won't make money, and the road won't make money directly. So they know that the system is designed to lend money that can be reimbursed, and then take over those countries and maintain them in chains. So that is basically what's happened with this debt system. The other ways of stealing regarding the economy is the fact that a lot of vital sectors of the economy are controlled by foreign powers, foreign companies. So sometimes you will hear a very African sounding name like M-Pesa. In Kenya, this is a service that helps people use mobile money. It's very advanced compared to what is, for example, available in Europe. And so it's people are really proud of that system. We are saying that it's a great African innovation. People are talking about Silicon Savannah. So Silicon Savannah is basically, it is the fact that in Nairobi, in Kenya, there is now a big tech hub, and there will be a lot of startups. So basically, we are catching up, and everything will be rosy. So that is the vision. But in reality, when you look at what M-Pesa is, you notice that M-Pesa is controlled by Safaricom, which is the main telco operator in Kenya, and Safaricom is the property of Vodafone, which is a UK company. And this is the same thing for a lot of sectors in Africa. Most of the oil are exploited by foreign companies. Most of the banks are actually properties of foreign banks. So all the sectors of activity are controlled by foreign powers who repatriate all their profits to their own countries, obviously. So what we have here is really a system of poverty, of self-perpetuating poverty. And when we hear that there is growth, Africa is growing, usually it's just a fake growth, or this growth is just captured by those foreign companies and a few of the local elites here. So here is an example of that. We have we have this French guy at the center of the picture. He's called Pierre Castel, and he claims to make 25%, to get 25% of the profits of the beer market in Africa, of the entire beer market in Africa. This guy take 25% of the profits. So even for basic goods like beer, we have foreign company making money, getting all the money on our soil. So another example, we have a statue of African Renaissance in Senegal. It's very famous, but the thing is, it has been built by a North Korean company of all sorts, a North Korean company and a Romanian architect. And how can we talk about African Renaissance if you are not even able to build a statue, about African Renaissance? So that is the state of our economy today. Of course, the last aspect and of the most fundamental aspect of neocolonialism, as colonialism before, is violence. It is the fact that ultimately neocolonialism is backed by violence. And when people start to react, when the president, the government stop complying and try to walk in the direction of the interests of their people, the foreign powers will now have to get their hand dirty and start killing. So we have the situation today in Africa. So this is a map of the foreign military bases. So you see that every part of the continent is monitored, and we have boots on the ground from foreign countries, either officially or unofficially. And we know why they are here. We know why they are there, because we have a long list of our best leaders that have been killed by those forces. So we can name Patrice Lumumba, we can name Amilcar Cabral, we can name Thomas Sankara, and on and on and on and on. So those forces are there. They will stay. They will say that it's to protect Africa against terrorism, against external takeovers, but really they are just there to protect the interest and kill anyone who will be too angry about that. So this is something we have to keep in mind, is that those foreign powers are really there to protect their interest at all costs. And what we can do to change the situation is really to follow what Papa Garvey told us, really, because there is no other way. There is no other way to get out of this predicament. So what we have tried so far to try to get out of this predicament, to break our chains, there have been several strategies. I will speak specifically about the Pan-Africanist movement, because most of our population is not really even aware of this stuff. And I will just talk about what Pan-Africanists today have tried to implement as a strategy to solve the problem. So one thing that we have tried is personal development. Is basically, let's learn about our history, let's learn about our true values, and things will get better when that magic point is attained. The second thing is business. So the idea here is, let's focus on making money, and when we'll have enough money, then things will change. We will be able to change the situation. The other strategy has been demonstration in the West. So every time there is something bad that happens, we are on the streets, and obviously nothing changes. So it's the same thing every year or so. There is a bad thing that happens, and we are on the streets. Of course, it didn't work. Other strategy is lobbying in the West, trying to create some groups that will be able to influence some Western politicians and stuff. People try to get some job in parliament, in government, etc. And obviously, we have tried this strategy so far, and it didn't work. And the other thing is to try to make people more conscious and focus on that, focus on education. And today it has still not be very effective. We are still in the same predicament. So I'm saying that not to say that all the strategies are bad, because that is what we are doing, all of us now, and those are necessary. I'm just saying that on the grand scheme of things, this has not been yet effective enough, because we are still under neocolonialism, maybe even more deeply than we were before. We have also some Pan-Africanists that are really trying to get a grip of on the political activity, but still it's very timid, and basically they are saying that we need to talk to the existing political party and explain to them what are our demands, what are our ideas, and support them if they follow what we tell them to do. But the problem is that those parties are not Pan-Africanist parties, so why do we expect them to change anything? It's like, for example, expecting the African Union to do anything serious when we know that it's not a Pan-Africanist organization. It's an organization actually that has been created to crush the dream of Nkrumah. The dream of Nkrumah and Marcus Garvey was to have one united Africa in a single government, with a single army, with a single currency, a single economy, a single diplomacy, an African power. And what the African Union was a renunciation of that goal to have a Balkanized Africa. And we can't expect anything from really from those people. So this is a quote from Cheikh Anta Diop. The fundamental error of a reformist is that they do not seem to have a keen awareness of the fact that certain delays are fatal. After a certain gap, it's the destruction of American Indians, of the Australians, of the Bushmen. Highly evolved peoples were completely destroyed as a political unit, like the Carthaginians and the Etruscans. So what Cheikh Anta Diop is telling us here is that the situation is very serious, and if we don't take it very seriously, we'll end up like the American Indians or the Australians, Aboriginals, that have been just exterminated. And in the following year, after he wrote that part, he wrote again. So I will read the quote. I don't know if I have that here. He wrote those lines. The seriousness of the situation can be seen in the following figures. According to the latest communications made to the Academy of Sciences, the majority of Africans, 85 million, practice ancestral worship. So it was in the 50s. We will say a half-forgotten monotheism. 28 million are Muslim, 15 million are Catholics, and 4 million are Protestants. So he was saying in the 50s, most Africans were practicing African religion. The Christians and Muslims practitioners were in the minority. Christians and Muslims have a liturgy, are organized, and can carry out religious propaganda. Both are making feverish efforts to convert the 85 million Africans they call pagans. Thus, the westernization or the definitive orientalization of Africa is linked to the success of one or the other. It is reasonable to think that an African federal government will give equal arms to the proponents of the ancestral religions by provoking an ecumenical council and its priests to allow the creation of a hierarchy, a better adapted liturgy, the formation and the education of a caste of priests on a continental scale, the deepening and normalization of the dogma on the basis of ancestral monotheism. In doing so, the future federal government will protect the continent from any new insidious penetration from abroad, and will protect African from cultural alienation. So we are now in 2020, and the situation is the one that we can see on this map. So this is something that has been achieved during neo-colonial times, not even during colonial time. So after the colonial powers officially left, Africa was still in the majority practicing African religion. But now they are mostly Christian and Muslim, and this is a feat that has been achieved by the neo-colonial governments. So we have to fight against the neo-colonial government if we don't want the bad trends that we see in Africa to continue to amplify and to completely destroy our people in our continent and our diaspora around the world. So this is really our mission for the current generation. So the problem with all the methods that we have tried so far is that we have been focusing on the local initiatives that we had to do anyway. So it's not something that is useless. We had to do them, we have to do them, but we have not put enough emphasis on the global scale, on the state level scale. And the issue with that is most of nations that have been able to break their chains and become strong did this at the state level. So we always had a group of people who organized themselves to take state power so they can change the situation of the whole country. And here we have the NAMA palette, and this is an illustration of a unification of ancient Egypt, of a unification of Kemet by King Narmer, and it was a political event. And all the nations that have been able to reassert themselves in this world have used the same method. So it was the case in Mali with Emperor Sundiata Keita. It was the case in the Congo with the Kingdom of Congo. It was the case in Haiti with the Haitian Revolution and with Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines. It was the case in Burkina Faso with Thomas Sankara. It was the case in Ghana, who was one of the first countries to gain its independence with Kwame Nkrumah. It was the case with Maurice Bishop. It was the case with all of the great events that we can speak about. They were all great political events. But today, the situation of the Pan-Africanist movement on the political level is very dire. We don't have any real force on the ground on the African continent pushing for Pan-Africanist solutions on the state level. So that is why the situation is not improving, and that is why the situation is worsening day by day. So what we need to do, and I don't think that this is something new that I'm saying, is just repeating what our ancestors like Marcus Garvey and Cheikh Anta Diop advocated for, is that we need to build an organization or many organizations that will have a really deep impact on the political level and be able to create a really African-centered state. So at Nation Kamit, we call that the Kamit state, and we use the term of Kamitism instead of Pan-Africanism because we think it's more clear and it's more focused on African-centeredness, on Afrocentricity, and the term Kamit comes from the word Kemet, which means obviously ancient Egypt. And this idea of Kamitism is really Afrocentricity with a bigger focus on the political side. And we think we really need a revolution in Africa that will be Afrocentric in its sense. And that is what we call Revolutionary Kamitism. And we have to push forward the vision of Marcus Garvey on this idea of building an African empire that will be able to ensure the well-being of all African people abroad and on the continent in a very powerful way. And that is the only way we can do it. Today, for example, we see that the Chinese are number 2 in terms of power in this world. And we just need to look at the previous century and remember that the Chinese people were one of the lowest on the ranking in almost every way. And they have been able to put themselves back into the game. And they have been doing that because there was the Communist Party of China who put the country together again and push it forward. So if we don't have this same kind of event in Africa and vision, I'm afraid that in 50 years, we will be having those same discussions, or even worse, we won't be there anymore to have those discussions because the situation is very serious. So here is Baba Shankata Diop in a meeting with his political party, and I want to mention that because he's very well known for his historical studies, his scientific work, but he was also very committed on the political level. He created 3 political parties. He went into prison. It has been imprisoned jailed by Leopold Sédar Senghor that we saw earlier. So those elders really understood the importance of doing the political work on the ground. And this is a work that we are not really doing today. And we have to ask ourselves why and find the answer and most importantly, the solution. So I want to end this part with some quotes from our great ancestor, Baba and His Excellency Marcus Garvey. And I think I still have time here. I will read a few quotes on 3 themes. So those are the themes of government on the African Federal Global Government. The second theme is the threat of going back to slavery. And the third theme is the threat, the even bigger threat of being exterminated, of going extinct as a race. And this is something that Garvey was very, very, very conscious of. So government, the only wise thing for us as ambitious Negroes to do is to organize the world over and build up the race, for the race, a mighty nation of our own in Africa. And this race of ours that cannot get recognition and respect in the country where we were slaves, by using our own ability, power, and genius, will develop for ourselves in another country, in our habitat, a nation of our own, and be able to send back from that country, from that native habitat, to the country where we were once enslaved, representatives of our race that will get as much respect as any other ambassadors from any other race or nation. Within modern times, the Negro race has not had any real statesmen, and the masses of our people have always accepted the intentions and actions of the statesmen and leaders of other races as being directed in our interests, as a group in conjunction with the interests of others. Such a feeling on our part caused us to believe that the Constitution of the United States was written for Negroes, as well as the constitutions of England, France, Italy, Germany, and other countries where Negroes happen to have their present domicile, either as citizens or as subjects. That we suffer so much today under whatsoever flag we live is proof positive that constitutions and laws, when framed by the early advocates of human liberty, never included and were never intended for us as a people. It is only a question of sheer accident that we happen to be fellow citizens today with the descendants of those through the advocacy descendants laid the foundation for human rights. So this brings us to the point where, as a people, we can expect very little from the efforts of present-day statesmen of other races, in that their plans, as far as advantages to be derived therefrom are concerned, are laid only in the interests of their own people, and not in the interest of Negroes. Hence, it is imperative that Negroes as a people evolve just as this time a statesmanship sufficiently able to cope with the designs and movements that are being made that will, except we prevent it, ultimately mean our doom and destruction. As far as Negroes are concerned, in America, we have the problem of lynching, peonage, and disenfranchisement. In the West Indies, South and Central America, we have a problem of peonage, serfdom, industrial and political governmental inequality. In Africa, we have not only peonage and serfdom, but outright slavery, racial exploitation, and alien political monopoly. We cannot allow a continuation of these crimes against our race, as 400 million men, women, and children worthy of the existence given us by the divine creator. We are determined to solve our own problem by redeeming our motherland Africa from the hands of alien exploiters and found there a government, a nation of our own, strong enough to lend protection to the members of our race scattered all over the world and to compel the respect of the nations and races of the earth. So these are few words that Papa Garvey said about the importance of creating a government of our own in Africa. Until that thing is done, nothing will really be achieved. And there are other quotes. I will just move on quickly because we don't have enough time. So I will read some quotes now about the problem of the threat that we are facing that are very, very, very serious. So the first one of this threat is really a return to slavery. It can be seen as exaggerated, but times changes and stranger things have happened in this world. When a man is a slave, he has no liberty of action, no freedom of will. He is bound and controlled by the will and act of others, as the individual, so of the race. Slavery is a condition imposed upon individuals or races not sufficiently able to protect or defend themselves. And so long as a race or people expose themselves to the danger of being weak, no one can tell when they will be reduced to slavery. Now, on the topic of extermination. The leadership of the Negro of today must be able to locate the race, and not only for today, but for all times. It is in the desire to locate the Negro in a position of prosperity and happiness in the future that the Universal Negro Improvement Association is making this great fight for the race's emancipation everywhere and the founding of a great African government. Every sober-minded Negro will see immediately the reason why we should support a movement of this kind. If we will survive, then it must be done through our own energy. No race of weaklings can survive because there will be hard and strenuous days fraught with many difficulties. Let's move on. And he said, this rush for territory, this encroachment on lands, is only a desire of the strong races, a desire, especially of the white race, to get hold of those portions and bits of land necessary for their economic existence, knowing well that in another 200 years, there will be not enough supplies in the world for all of its inhabitants. The weaker people must die. At present, Negroes are the weakest people, and if we do not get power and strength now, we shall be doomed to extermination. Now let's conclude with this quote. The battles of the future, whether they be physical or mental, will be fought on scientific lines. And the race that is able to produce the highest scientific development is the race that will ultimately rule. When we speak about this topic of the physical existence at stake of the entire race, I think it is very important to see how prescient Marcus Garvey was, because he was speaking about this topic before World War II happened. He was already seeing how things could play out when a weak people is attacked by stronger people. He was also talking about this, the importance of scientific development, and saying that the race that is able to produce the highest scientific development is the race that will ultimately rule. So I am rounding up with the current things of affairs that are hot today in the scientific world and the new latest scientific and technological developments. And maybe you have heard about that experiment in China, where there is babies that had been created artificially. Their genes has been modified before they were born, and the pretext, the idea was to save them from a specific disease. And this experiment causes a lot of debate in the scientific community, especially the Western scientific community, because people were saying that it was immoral, it was dangerous, it was eugenics, etc. But the reality, the real thing here is that the Western people, they were really afraid of the Chinese people getting ahead getting an advantage in this race to master the design of humans, because that is what we are talking about. And the idea here is that if the Chinese master this technology, they will be able to produce smarter Chinese people. They will be able to produce more resistant Chinese people, stronger Chinese people. So they will be able to produce something akin to superhumans. And then what will happen to the Western people? And what will happen, of course, to other people of the world? They will be dominated by a race of Chinese supermen. So this looks like science fiction, but we have to say that is what people are working on right now. And those are different areas of science that are being developed today that will have a big impact for power in tomorrow's world. And His Excellency Marcus Garvey was really talking about power in everything he said. And when we look at space exploration, there are consequences for Africa. For example, if all the resources, all the minerals, all the raw materials of Africa are exploited by others and consumed, and we don't have anything left in a few decades, and the others are going in space to take those raw materials, I don't know, in the moon, in Mars, what we will do? What we will do? And the other trend that we have to look at is this trend of transhumanism, because there are several fields that are converging to create conditions that we have never dreamed of before. We have never thought about what will happen, where we will have people who are superhuman that will be coming for us, what we will do. So let's close again with that quote of Cheikh Anta Diop. The fundamental error of a reformist is that they do not seem to have a keen awareness of the fact that certain delays are fatal. After a certain gap, it's the destruction of American Indians, of the Australians, of the Bushmen. Highly evolved people were completely destroyed as a political unit, like the Carthaginians and the Etruscans. So let's not make the same mistakes. We have work to do. Asante.
Tendamwari. Garvey lives. Mosiah lives.
Garvey
Give
lives.
thanks, Brother Abiola. Give thanks, Brother Abiola, for that really insightful, really life-saving message. Sisters and brothers, if you've joined us during the presentation, you just listened to Brother Abiola Sow from Nation Kamit, based in France currently. The message was the fight against neo-colonialism. We're going to open up the session now, sisters and brothers. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, Alkebu-Lan Way, you can post questions in the chat. I believe Shakara will put the link in the chat as well, so you can join the conversation right now, sisters and brothers. So feel free to give your comments, questions, responses to what Brother Abiola has just shared with us, and it was a very important life-saving message. For those of you who just joined, let me just give a quick overview of what Brother Abiola shared with us. He began, of course, by defining neo-colonialism. Essentially, it's something which is a system run by stooges to enrich foreign European powers. He emphasized that the flag, the anthems, and even the soccer teams do not equal independence. And he referenced, of course, that masterwork by Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism. He emphasized that neocolonialism functions because it is hidden. It needs puppets like Bokassa or Ouattara or Sal or Sweet Mickey to function, African puppets to function. And it's brainwashing is a key function of neocolonialism to create those puppets. That's why we de-brainwashing sisters and brothers, and more about that later on. In fact, Brother Abiola shared that Kwame Nkrumah said that neocolonialism is a worse form of imperialism because it produces power without responsibility and exploitation without redress. It's like a scaffolding. Some of the effects that we can see of neocolonialism are that all the official languages in the motherland are foreign. When you can compare that with micro-states like Iceland and Finland have their national languages which are indigenous to their people. So it's Africans indeed that are making European languages and Euro-Arab religions even international, not the Arabs or the Europeans themselves. We're driving them forward. So part of the process was zombification that functions in neocolonialism. So there's a stealing and a rebranding going on, created by front organizations. He mentioned the example of the farce of the Renaissance statue, built and designed by non-Africans. He emphasized that there's no other way than the Garvey black print, looking at the legacy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, as well as the insightful writings of Sheikh and activism of Sheikh Anta Diop. The self-development money, the demos and lobbying and establishment politics have their place, but they're not sufficient for us to gain African redemption. He mentioned that the African Union was created to crush the dream of Nkrumah and Garvey. So what should we do? Brother Abiola emphasized we need to build a mass organization under what he calls Revolutionary Kamitism, which is Afrocentricity with a political emphasis. We need to look at the transformation of China within the last century and ask ourselves, where will we be in the next 50 years? Return to slavery is certainly on the agenda, as is extermination. Some of the coming threats he mentioned in terms of science, this is where he said Garvey was prescient in looking at the importance of science and technology in moving a people forward. Space exploration, transhumanism, biogenetics, cloning, electronics, robotics, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and neurosciences are all being developed by our enemies. Indeed, the race is on to create artificially manufactured babies, even to try and create superhuman beings, which in essence, what they're trying to do probably is create Africans really in their own image and likeness, but obviously create Africans without the Africans indeed. So that's what they're trying to do, sister and brothers. So, sister and brother, we're going to open the platform. Any questions you want to ask or comments you want to make to Brother Abiola, put in the chat. Brother Shakara has put the link. He's going to come on directly and speak directly to Brother Abiola in the chat as well. If you're watching on YouTube, sister and brother, if you're watching from Alkebu-Lan.org, switch over to YouTube, watch from Alkebu-Lan Way, our YouTube channel, and you can interact and engage directly with Brother Abiola. It's an important discussion, sisters and brothers, because from the time that Kwame Nkrumah outlined the perniciousness of neocolonialism, we've been fighting with it for the last 50 years or so. And as he said clearly, on the agenda for us, if we don't organize, it's extermination or slavery. The killing of the spirit, the killing of the body of African people. So we need to make sure that we organize this, and brothers, and we need to have that conversation, that reasoning on that agenda. This is life and death situation, sisters and brothers.
So no worry. I don't mind getting the questions started. You know, I do have a question for Brother Abiola, if I may.
Indeed, Brother Shakara, please come through with a question.
Don't worry. The Brother Abiola, as always, you know, I think very highly of your neocolonialism breakdown. It's excellent and one of the best in terms of updating our understanding of neocolonialism to this time. So let me get visual. Sorry, correct my.
While you're not Shakara, let me tell you that Brother Shakara has been so much input into this year's Mosiah season. So hail him up for all the work he's done and put together, again, bringing this platform to yourself, system, brother. Shakra, go ahead.
Give thanks to that right attender. So the question in relation to is in relation to Sweet Mickey, brother Abiola. And I think he's an interesting case study, right? Now, sorry. Yeah, okay. Now, when it comes to Sweet Mickey, the interesting thing about Sweet Mickey is that he was considered, when he was running for election, to be a man of the people.
Yeah,
yes, populist leader, because obviously, as you know, he was a musician. And as a musician, he had the ears of the people, and he was supposed to represent a significant change. Yeah. In the establishment, the political establishment in Haiti, and so he was celebrated for that reason. But now we've seen what he has turned out to be. Yeah, so oftentimes we speak about neocolonialism that is often replaced with the word corruption nowadays. Yeah, and as though it's a particular class of politicians, yeah, alone. And I've always felt that, in my humble opinion, 9 out of 10 of us, ordinary people in the same position, are going to produce the same results, yeah, in terms of neocolonialism. So it doesn't matter where we're coming from. So what do you think? Well, using Sweet Mickey as an example, do you think he was corrupted by the politics, or his values were already misplaced prior to him becoming the head of state in that regard?
Thank you, brother Shaka. Very interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
My conviction is that he was already a corrupted character.
Mm-hmm.
I think the power just amplified the original character, but I think this particular individual was already corrupt. And
Right.
One thing that is really important is that we can't expect one individual to change the system. And even if that individual is super talented, is super committed, if it's just one individual, it will be a disaster. So even if we look at the Burkina Faso experience with Thomas Sankara, we can say that there were not a real political party behind Thomas Sankara. It was a coalition of military people. Some of them wanted really to change things, and some of them just wanted to get into power, you see. So when they get into power, what happens is that Thomas Sankara is at the helm of the government. He is very popular, but the man who really has a grip on the army, the one who is really the master of the army, is Blaise Compaoré. And Blaise Compaoré is not there to change anything about the system. He's there to put himself into power, you see. So Thomas Sankara alone, with a few really committed people, couldn't change the system. So we really need to have a whole organization who would take power and have a real political program that will be applied, you see. So for Sweet Mickey, there were not even that political program. There were no organization pushing a particular program. So it was clear that it will fail.
Thank you very much, brother.
Just wanted to add to that, actually, we could even see a similar example with Jacob Zuma in Azania.
Mm-hmm.
He again came forward as a very populist leader. And at least one thing Sweet Mickey doesn't have on his copybook, as it were, is Marikana, that Jacob Zuma has, as well as the fact that we have to look at the factor or help bring Jacob Zuma to prominence was Jacob Malema at the time when he's in the ANC youth. And then when the job was done, they made sure they ousted Jacob Zuma as he was surplus to requirements. So yeah, that certainly emphasizes that as well, my brother.
I do have. I could ask more questions, but I know brother Makola is here, so I want to give him the opportunity if he wants to come forward. He did type his question in the back chat actually, but if he wants us to come and say it live, feel free.
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Oh no,
ahead,
great show. Thank you. I mean, the presentation was great. I didn't hear everything, but I heard a good 10 minutes of it towards the end. So it was really well presented and really well laid out. So for all of us to really begin to think about some of these issues in a deeper way. I suppose the question I wanted to ask and what I'll ask was really about the class struggle within the African continent and also an African community. Because often when we talk about neo-colonialism, we often talk about individuals who are just corrupt or who are just sellouts, but we don't actually understand the way in which the imperialists, when they took over Africa and set about imposing a new economic structure, which we refer to as in the Uhuru movement, we refer to as parasitic capitalism. So there's a capitalism that we have in the West, in Britain and France, America, where we see factories and workers and what have you. And there's a capitalism we have in Africa where we see genocide, we see enslavement, we see people being exploited to the max, children working in mines and stuff like that. That's parasitic capitalism where there's no investment, there's no nothing. So the question really what I wanted to emphasize, and that's about class struggle, because Nkrumah recognized that after he was overthrown, he didn't realize that when the imperialists set up capitalism in Africa, parasitic capitalism in Africa, is they also created a class, a middle class, the class between the working people, the peasants, and the class between the imperialists themselves. And these, middle class, we refer to them, and Kwame Nkrumah referred to them as petty bourgeois class. And really, what I'm trying to say here is that we never really address the class struggle in our community. We always refer to things in terms of race and the need for us to kind of unite under race, and we always get a little bit overwhelmed. We don't understand when we see people in places like the DR Congo, where they would side with the Chinese or they would side with the West against their own people, with the exploitation and the wars that are taking place, funded by the West. And people don't understand why would someone like Paul Kagame send in soldiers in Rwanda to kill Africans in order. They don't get it. They don't get the way in which the petty bourgeois class are set up to enrich themselves and to sell out Africans. Nothing to do with the individualism. Nothing to do with in terms of people selling out, it's part of their class. They identify themselves with the West. Every solution that they sort of get, every problem they have, the West is their solution. When it comes to getting treatment abroad, when it comes to protection in terms of military support and all this kind of stuff, political alliance, they get it abroad. So like the question really is about class struggle. What do we do? How do we organize around class struggle as opposed to organizing around race and the assumption that we're all under one? Because there are people out there who call themselves Pan-Africanists and they love Paul Kagame and they just cannot see what I'm giving an example Kagame because people love him. People love Mobutu and they couldn't see what he was doing, and the fact that they couldn't work out why, they couldn't see what he was doing against the African working class. But again, they couldn't also comprehend why he did turn against his own people. So I'll stop there, particularly his betrayal of Lumumba. So I'll stop there, but the question is about class struggle. What do we do with it? So you've got an organization taking on the issue of neocolonialism. What are we doing about the actual class struggle, the people who have been set up to be the neocolonialists? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Brother Marcola. Abiola.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, that's a deep question, and it's a very central question, I will say, inside the Pan-Africanist movement, actually, because regarding economics, there are really two schools. There are really two schools. There are the Pan-Africanist brothers and sisters who are more into market-oriented or more capitalism-oriented solutions to organize the economy. And there are brothers and sisters who are more into the socialist side of the spectrum. So obviously the analysis will differ from those two sides. So personally and at Nation Kamit, we are trying to find an Afrocentric way to move forward. So our solution will look like a mix of different things, but it is because we are really trying to see it from an Afrocentric, African-centered point of view. So I wanted to start with that first. And regarding your question of class, it's a core one because there is a work that I think we need to study, and it's a work by Amika Cabral. It's an article that has been published written in 1964, and the title is Brief Analysis of the Social Structure in Guinea. And what he was doing in this article is he did a lot of investigation in the countryside and in the cities to see what were the classes, the social classes, that could support the revolution, that could support the struggle for independence. And he was seeing the issue as a two-stage issue. So the first stage, the first step was independence, and the second step was the revolution, more in the Marxist sense, actually. And initially, when the party was created, they tried to mobilize the workers in the capital, in Guinea-Bissau, and they did a big strike, and the result was a disaster because they were not very well prepared, they were not very well supported, and the workers actually were really a minority class and not strong enough to support the independence movement. So what Cabral did was to do this investigation in each of the social classes in Guinea-Bissau and analyze the structure of each class and see, for example, for the Balance or for the Manjak or for the Fulani people who are there, or for example, inside each class for the Fulani chiefs, for the Fulani peasantry, what the people want, what do these people are struggling with, what do they are striving for? Are they working with the colonial government? Do their interest lie with the colonial government, or are they waiting for the colonial government to get away? And by doing this, he was able to see that it was not the workers in the traditional Marxist sense that will be the main force to support the independence movement. And also, contrary to the Chinese experience, for example, it wouldn't be the peasantry that will actually be the core force for the movement also toward independence. And it will be actually the petty bourgeoisie, so as you call it, that will be the core force to support the independence movement, because they were the one that were the most frustrated by the situation, because they were also the most advantaged. You see, by the situation, they were close to the Portuguese, and they were expecting things that the Portuguese wouldn't give them to them, and that caused a lot of frustration. They were also the only one that were equipped with the modern thinking tools to be able to take upon the Portuguese and lead the movement. And you see, it was not an orthodox conclusion, because no one was expecting this petty bourgeoisie to be the forefront of the revolution, at least for the fight for independence. But in the Guinea-Bissau context of that time, it was the only solution. So they focused on the middle class, the lower middle class, to build the movement and go to independence. That also had consequences, because we saw that after Cabral was killed, what resulted from this movement is a typical neo-colonial arrangement that we see today. So I think that what we have to do today for this thing to work is to do the same work. That is, to analyze what are the different classes that we have. For example, we have a lot of peasants who has moved to the capital, who have moved to the cities, and they are not peasants anymore, but they are not really workers, because they are more they are unemployed or underemployed, and they don't fit in any real category, classic category. So what are the interests of those people? What are their dreams? What do they want? And what are the interests of merchants? We have a lot of artisans, a lot of craftsmen, craftswomen. We have a lot of people who are selling on the markets. They have different needs from the middle class that we are seeing. And also inside the middle class, we can see that there is a high middle class, people who have big jobs in government, in the administration. They are fundamentally tied to the neo-colonial system. And we have those small teachers, we have those small agents of the governments who are suffering. You can see the same thing in the army. You have the big head, the big generals, the big colonels who are tied to the neo-colonial systems. And you can see that you have a simple soldier who don't even get paid, and we're not that invested in the system and is waiting for a new solution. So I think that is the kind of approach that we have to do. And I think that today there are many groups inside our population, and they are the majority that are looking for a change. There are a minority group that is not looking for a change, and that is our task to organize the groups that are in the majority to change the situation. So that is what I can say at this stage. If maybe you want me to develop on a specific point, I can try.
I have a contribution to make to this conversation. Yeah. By the way, Kings and Queens, once again, the link is in the chat if you want to come live with us and join this conversation. Feel free to do so. But yeah, brother Makola raises an interesting point, and unfortunately, I don't have my copy of Class Struggle in Africa with me. But I do recall in the introduction to the book where he's kind of setting up the basis. Sorry.
Who is he?
Sorry, the Asante for Kwame Nkrumah was setting up the foundation, the kind of the context for class distinction on the continent. He speaks about it within the context of colonization and the imposition, yes, of European political order and cultural order. And I think this is instructive because and this relates to the last question, the previous question on Sweet Mickey, because I actually think that the key foundational contradiction is not necessarily class, although it manifests in class. The key contradiction is values, yeah, and values are a product of culture. And so when we speak about this, I think more when we say race, often we're really speaking about culture. Maybe we should use that word more. But what I mean by that is I put it to brothers and sisters that we live at a time whereby whatever our class distinction within a society, what is common is our indoctrination into European values, politically, economically, and otherwise. Yeah. So when we speak of our education, yeah, we conceive of development, whatever class stratification we work with under, in terms that are defined by Europeans. Yeah, we see development as Vodafone coming in and installing the internet, yeah, into a village, yeah, and these kinds of things. That's how we conceive of development. And so it would be difficult for a person, wherever their class designation within a society, to overcome that acculturation if they get into a position of power. I don't think that for the most part, from a class perspective, that we are going to produce anything different, yeah, if we were to take over the reins of state, except for when we have been reacculturated into an African-centered political trajectory, if that makes sense. And I hope I'm not being convoluted in what I'm saying. I hope I'm being concise and making sense. So yeah, I'll leave that there.
Yes, right. Just gonna go to the chat on this issue. Still got a post from our brother Tristan Samuel. Big up, brother Tristan. We had him on our show quite recently. And brother Tristan asked, does class analysis risk overlooking the overall presence of European social and political institutions and people in Black countries?
I got the impression that brother Macaulay wanted to say something as well, so I don't know if yeah, sorry. Yep,
brother Macaulay, do you want to come back on what's been said by either brother Abiola or brother Shakara, or indeed the question from brother Christian as well?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, yeah, I would love to. I mean, I love to. Just to say it quickly, just because I've got to go as well. Sorry, I'm on my father's duty. So I appreciate the response. It was really detailed and kind of both brother Shakara and brother Abiola. So is that right? So I guess what I wanted to add, two things, I suppose. One was really just add to what brother Shakara was talking about, which is if we look at other countries and how they took on imperialism, and sometimes when we compare Chinese people to us in terms of what they've been through, of course, no one's been through what we've been through in terms of suffering, but the closest group of people in recent time, I suppose, would be the Chinese. If you look at what the Japanese do to them and how China was split up amongst the different imperialist nations, it mirrors similar to what we've been through to some extent. And I guess what I'm saying is that when they had a cultural revolution, two things they did when Mao took power in China. One is that as soon as he took over an area, the Mao or the Red Army, they would bring about justice. They'll bring about distribution of land. They'll bring about a people's court, which will bring about some form of justice that was done under the the neo-colonial or the colonial system. Two, later on in 1960s, we saw how there was a cultural revolution, which really transformed China. You hear Western imperialists talk about, the starvation that took place, the famine that took place in China because of that rara. But actually, what it did do is it brought about a form of Chinese nationalism and a kind of it kind of cleaned out China, cleaned out the Chinese who were attached to the previous system, the previous neo-colonial colonial system, because China was split up into different sort of warlords and areas like Hong Kong were owned by the British areas. What we now call, I suppose, Indochina was controlled by the French. So all these sort of Chinese area was ripped. China was ripped apart by the imperialists. But Mao did his best with the Red Army and the Communist Party to unite China and to bring about cultural revolution, which was about undermining Western ideas and philosophy. And we see today even the Chinese, they decide who is the head of their Catholic church, not the Pope in Rome. They decide who should be the head of the Catholic Pope, and they have that who should be the head of the Catholic Church in China. But also so what I'm saying is that we need to have a revolution, which we to some extent we saw in different parts of Africa after independence struggle. But we didn't have a cultural revolution, and we didn't have a unification of Africa, and we didn't have our own army, because Mao came to power with his own army, and his army didn't just take over China. It actually fought the US in the war between North and South Korea. That wasn't about North and South Korea. That was about China. It was about the US versus China. And China also, people may not know this, but also trained the Vietnamese when they were fighting the French and when they were fighting the Americans. So in effect, what you can say, it was China that defeated America in Vietnam and in North and South Korean war. And in fact, they pushed them back to where we now, where we now see the division between North and South Korea. America was winning up until the point where they got near China, and Chinese sent 1 million people almost. So what I'm saying is that we haven't had that. We haven't had a cultural revolution. We haven't had a movement that came to power with its own army, which brought about a justice and transformation. We haven't really seen that. What we have seen is a situation where a regime change, a kind of regime change, changing of seats in the same system. So you had the West left, and they put a new person comes in. Lumumba didn't have his own army. If you take Mugabe was a petty bourgeois, and he was clear. He was one of those people that I think Brother Abiola was talking about, the radical petty bourgeois. So within the petty bourgeois forces, there were those who did want independence. They didn't want independence to bring about justice and to transform the economy of the African states. They wanted to be like the white man. They wanted, to be like the white man. So that's what they wanted. So they want to change, not change for everybody. They want to change for themselves. Let's give an example quickly before I finish. Oh, sorry, guys. With Nigeria. So you take Nigeria, when BP, British Petroleum or Shell, they come to an area, they come to, let's say, Nigeria, the Niger Delta, they take out oil. The middle class will get jobs, the petty bourgeois will get lovely jobs, the comprador, they will get jobs working in different sectors of the oil, in the capital. They get all the executive jobs, the marketing jobs, all these kind of stuff, right? Consultation jobs, they get all that. But then the peasants in the area in the Niger Delta where oil is coming from, their water is polluted, they can't fish, their farming land is destroyed, and in areas where they're too close to where it's gold mining or also the oil, the army will come in there and push them out. So the armies we have in Africa, let's take Nigeria again. 40% of the budget for the Nigerian army is funded by the oil company, which means the Nigerian army is the army for the oil company. So the peasants in Nigeria don't benefit from the oil, and they know that. There's no two way about it. So if you want to organize a transformation of Nigeria, in other words, you want to overthrow neocolonialism in Nigeria, those people in Niger Delta State are the people to start with, because they're not benefiting from the oil. The oil is damaging their land, is damaging the water supply, and it's forcing the army to push them out, so they can't go to where they normally go to do farms, and it's forcing them to starvation. So they have an invested interest to see the overthrow of neocolonialism. But what we find is many African groups, we don't organize these people. We don't, we leave it to the Oxfam or this kind of organization to go and set up charity and obscure the relationship between NGOs. Us, and NGOs, So I guess that's where I'm heading at in calling for not just Brother Abiola, but all of us as organizers, myself and the Hulu movement, is to organize these peasants and the workers, who have nothing to lose from overthrowing neocolonialism. I guess that's where the point I'm making at. And we also know that there are radical petty bourgeois forces. Nkrumah himself was a petty bourgeois force, a teacher, Mugabe, and what have you. And I think Congo Bro talked about class suicide. I think it was him, right? We talked about class suicide. There are those who understand that their interest really lies with revolution as opposed to neocolonialism, and they're prepared to make that class suicide. And there are those who are prepared to do the opposite, Mobutu of this world, Kagame, to name a few. And Abacha. There's plenty of lists of the neocolonialists who are prepared to see their future with the imperialists as opposed to with the people. So I'll stop there. But that's the point I'm trying to make, that there are people out there who are ready to see the ending of neocolonialism, because it doesn't benefit them at all. People in Eastern Congo are not for neocolonialism. There's nothing there for them. I'll stop there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Give thanks, Brother McCullough. Right. Just to quickly say, with the Zimbabwe situation, we do know that there's nuances there, because obviously the land reclamation did seek to put land back into the hands of the masses. We know the situation now is obviously quite challenging, but that was the objective of the program. But I just want to reflect on Brother Tristan's question again, and also just on the NGO question. There's a question we're going to come to soon from our brother Kweko as well. But just to remind you, Brother Tristan Samuel, we know, is one of our warrior scholars based at Temple University in USA, Medioneta scholar, and linking that to our community languages right now. So Brother Tristan actually says, does class analysis risk overlooking the overall presence of European social and political institutions and people in Black countries? So that's Brother Tristan's question.
Okay. Can I start?
Yes, go ahead, Brother Abiola. Sorry.
Okay. Just wanted to just to come back just quickly to the previous question, because I think it's a very important question, and this question is obviously related. And I think the class analysis framework is a useful one. I don't think it has to be the only one, but it is a useful one that we can use. And one thing that is very important regarding the relation between the weight we have to put on the cultural framework and the class framework is that it is very difficult for someone to understand something he is paid to not understand. So the issue is that in our countries, we have people who are paid to not understand things. So there are groups who are not understanding the message because they have not been exposed to the message. So those people, clearly it's about culture, and we have to go to them and try to make our case. But there are people who are there, they are paid to not understand things, and their livelihood depends on not understanding. So those people, no amount of explanation about cultural Afrocentricity will make them change. So I think that is when this class framework can be useful. But one thing that is very important is that we are many brothers and sisters on the left who are very rigid on this use of the class framework, and really on of a Marxist ideology. But when we look at someone like Amilcar Cabral, he was not an orthodox Marxist. And for example, he was someone that was very focused on culture and was very deep into African culture. So when he needed to recruit young people to mobilize for the freedom fight, to create the army, the liberation army, sometimes he will go to the communities and say, oh, currently you have this rite of passage, you have this initiation process that you are doing. So here is the current political situation. We have to get rid of the Portuguese. So this is something we need to take to put into our initiation process. That means that the young men won't become men until they are freedom fighters. And he was able to incorporate that liberation struggle into the initiation process. So that is how deep he was into African culture, and he was able to use African culture to mobilize for the independence struggle. The second thing I wanted to mention about Cabral is that there was a big conference called the Tricontinental. I think it was in Cuba, and Cabral came and he gave this speech, and it was an amazing speech because here was this African guy from a country that most people would not even be able to put on the map. Mm-hmm. And he came and basically said that the Marxist vision of linear evolution for all society was really not a universal thing. It was not something that was applicable to African society because it was conceived first as an European analysis, and we didn't have the same conditions in Africa, and history couldn't be linear and couldn't follow the European pattern. And this is the kind of attitude I think we have to have when using things like class analysis, etc. And one thing I asked, because I think I already mentioned that in the discussions the later day, I was deep into the Marxist analysis, and I actually started getting interested in politics by looking at communism and stuff. And the issue I have today is that when I ask a very simple question, I don't really have the answer. I ask, what is, to my brother and sister on the left, I ask them, what are you advocating that is different from what the Soviet Union or the communist China was doing and abandoned? Because if that was successful, they will just continue it by they left that program and now they are back into capitalism. So what is your analysis of that situation and what will you do differently? And the thing is, there is no clear answer today. So that is one thing I think we have to be very careful. The class analysis framework is useful, but the suggestions, the conclusions that comes out of that has to be from an African-centered point of view. So does class analysis risk overlooking the overall presence of European social and political institutions in Black countries? I don't think so. I think if you use it correctly and not as a kind of Bible, it will just help put light on some issues. So for example, regarding the capitalists in Africa, there are not many capitalists in Africa because the capital comes from other countries. So we have what Cabral would call comprador bourgeoisie, that those are people who don't really have capital, but they are managing the companies of foreign enterprises on our soil. So they get rewarded, they have a lot of money, but they are not really capitalists. So when you will try to push an African-centered program and try to say that we need to nationalize some of the companies, they will be against it because it will go against their interest. So this is the class interest, for example. So that is useful, but not as a kind of Bible. And I don't think, that the Bible angle is good.
So go on, Mama. I was going to read some Cabral to spice up the conversation, but go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add to tender Brother Abiola for your presentation today and your further comments. I think sometimes what we have to realize when we're talking about class and race, when we're looking at class has already been defined and refined and extra refined and put into so many books, and for the whole international world to pick and choose and squeeze and, like Mama Mambo Amma said, stretch. When you're talking about race first politics, there's a tendency I find to undermine the intellectualism behind the concept of race first. So somehow it's more like it's presented as if it's just emotional and irrational. So it's not refined and it's not analytical and it's not technical. And so we have to stop using that word. And I think Papa Garvey, you couldn't get something more intellectual and concise and refined and precise than Papa Garvey gave us. And I think we need to use that's our black print. That's what we need to use to really push this movement forward. I think once we start to backtrack and then try and either see how we can compete or present it like class first analysis, we're on the losing treadmill right now. We can't even compare ourselves to China. China didn't go through what we went through. So it's all well and good. China did this and China did that. And what's happening in China now is kind of questionable anyway, some of the Chinese themselves. But the reality is our situation is a very complex, it's multifaceted. It has never stopped. This terrorizing of Africa has not stopped. It's been continuous, unrelenting. At every avenue we turn, it's just consistent. And so I think to ever take race out of the agenda, it's going to be our downfall, because we are oppressed because of our race. It's as simple as that. Anywhere we find ourselves in the world, look at Oprah with her millions. Look at Oprah and some little twopence mealy mouth European start to question her capacity to spend. All these film stars and politicians, they're nobody at the end of the day. When they want to bring you down, they will bring you down. So it's not a matter of class, it is a matter of race. And I agree with Brother Abiola. It's good, you can't surmount what you don't know. It's good to read and study their history, their culture, because they're the ones that are terrorizing us, how they came about, what brought them to where they are, what system they have set up to prop them up, to strengthen them, what they've dismantled. It's all good to read all of that and know that, but it's not going to take us anywhere. Papa Garvey, race first. Put your race first, like all other races do. Thanks.
Yeah. Let me just throw in Brother Kweku's question. Again, thank Brother Kweku for what he said. It's a great presentation. Brother Abiola mentioned that funds / loans are sent to corrupt puppet leaders who steal the money. Can he speak about NGOs in Africa and their role in undermining African governments? Money is being sent to Africa to the NGOs, bypassing the governments. Tendamari, that's from Brother Kweku.
Thank you. The presence of NGOs on a mass scale in our countries is a manifestation of an absent state, of a failed government. Basically, the NGO are running the country instead of the government. So there was this passage in one of Nkrumah's book when he was speaking about those NGOs, and he was saying that for a lot of them, they were just also covert operations, or they were just covert operations for spying activities for different agencies in the Western world. So this is also one of the most dangerous things. We have those agencies that are in our countries, and they operate as NGOs, and they are spying, and they are trying to identify who would be the best puppet to put in power in 5, 10, 15 years. And all the NGO who are into democracy, human rights, etc., they are just fronts that will be selecting the best speaking leaders and put them into some kind of program to put them in charge in 5, 10, 15, 20 years afterwards. So those are very dangerous, and you can see that in countries that are serious about their security, they don't allow those kind of NGOs to operate in their countries. Of course, our countries are neo-colonies, so they can operate freely. So this is the first kind of NGO. The second kind of NGO are really the ideological one. So those are not involved really in security affairs, but they are there to push an agenda and to brainwash people. So they will be talking about same-sex marriage, so topics that are not really at the forefront of African problems. They will be talking about extinction. They will be talking about corruption, all kind of stuff that are not the core problem of Africans. So, for example, we know that in China, there is a large-scale, formidable corruptions running out. China is very corrupt, but China is moving. So corruption is not like the big issue that they are talking about. At least it's not the central one. The central one being that we are exploited by neo-colonialist government, and that kind of issue. The NGOs are not talking about that. And sometimes you will see that in certain countries, the only good jobs that we have are in those NGOs, and that is the system that is self-perpetuating. So all the smart people will come out of school, will try to find jobs in these NGOs. They will get brainwashed and come back and try to push their country even further into the ground. So I think for us as a Pan-Africanist, those NGOs, for the most part, will need to be monitored, and most of them very, very curtailed. Yeah.
Thanks, Abiola. Yeah, sister and brother. So, any comments on questions? Put them in the chat. You've got the link in there if you want to join us directly and speak and engage with Brother Abiola. Also, we have, as you can see, Brother Shekara and Sister Senior Pioneer Kai at Wagadar Bandaka as well, sister and brothers. So this is one of our Mosiah sessions, the War Against Neo-Colonialism, delivered by our brother Abiola Sow from Nation Kamit, based in France and also in the motherland, Tendamwari.
I just wanted to mention also something about the NGOs, is that a lot of them don't even hide anymore that they have political agendas, you see. So we have a lot of them that are funded by the Open Society organization, which is funded by George Soros, and they are very open about it. They are there to push regime changes, to push for their vision of government, and it's very open. It's not even hidden anymore. So that's the state where we have. And the thing is, in front of those NGOs, we don't have a Pan-Africanist counter force. That is the real issue, because we have all kind of agents in our countries. We have the NGOs, we have the secret services who are operating, we have foreign companies, we have all kind of bad people who are on our continents and our countries. But what do we have in front of those people?
You know what, brother Abiola, on that question, yeah. So we have Agence Pan-Africaniste, yeah, and they have organized as a Pan-African NGO quite specifically, and I know that you were saying that we need to take back state power. So it begs the question about strategies for doing so. And I know that And what do you think of the idea of Pan-African NGOs as a stepping stone or a strategy for doing so?
My question will be, why do we need stepping stones?
Okay, it's a good question. The answer to your question is simply we are not yet organized in a way that would enable us to move and grab state power. Like, so there's obviously a role between where we are at now and the capacity to take the reins of state.
That's a good angle. I think it's reasonable, but in practice, I don't think that is effective, because that is the approach we have been doing for decades, and most of the organizations that have started as NGOs didn't morph into political parties. So in terms of results, we can already see that it's very difficult when you don't start with this political goal in mind to change course after a few years. So that is one thing. The second thing I will mention is that most of the political parties that have been able to take state power started very small. So there were really no need for a lot of stepping stones. For example, Cabral's party, the PIGEGC, started with 7 people. 2 of them, I think, were traitors. So there were already 5 of them, actually. And they did manage to achieve some results. So I don't think there is an opposition. Of course, if there is a big preparation step, that is not bad. But I don't think that we need to have too many stepping stones before starting. A party can start very small and expand.
All right, let me challenge you slightly. Yeah, as far as where we are at the moment, it would seem, yeah, that the strategy being employed by the brothers and sisters in Jones Pan-Africanism, and I'm not trying to draw you into a situation whereby you're critiquing them necessarily. I'm just saying that this is an active scenario right now, whereby we see that the works of this organization has been able to galvanize many thousands of people in various different countries around a political agenda in ways that other forms of organizing are not doing at the moment, or would appear to be less effective at the moment. So doesn't it not seem obvious that this strategy is working?
Well, obviously, I'm not in the knows about the very deep strategy, the internal strategy of Urgence Pan-Africanism. So what I will say is just by some the things that I can notice from outside. I will say that first, the results has been very good. They have been the one to energize and push different issues to the forefront, to the mainstream even, I will say. So this is a really big achievement, and we have to acknowledge that. But I would say that when you listen to Brother Kemi Seba different speeches, a lot of time is alluding to the political angle clearly, and has even created the Pan-Africanist Party of recently. It is very clear for them that there has to be some political initiative to be taken at a party level. So I think it is going there. Now the question is, should they have started by start with a party directly, or it was better to start as an NGO? I don't know. The only thing I say is that when we look on the world level, most of the countries where there have been some changes, the changes have been brought up by political parties. We didn't need to spend 20 years or 50 years as NGOs. So why in Africa should be doing the reverse?
Point taken. So, somebody jump in because I will hog the mic on this subject, so I don't really want to. So.
Also, just to mention, when I'm saying political party, I'm not simply saying that you have a political party in your name. there are different movements that have political goals and are not officially political party. But I really think that we need to have a political program and a political strategy to take power, because it takes time. So 30 years to implement this strategy. It's better to start right now.
Understood.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sisters and brothers. So yeah, just so you know, we're going to be coming to the close quite soon. So any comments or questions, put them in the post or join us with the link, which is also in the chat if you're watching on Alkebu-Lan Way on our YouTube channel. Just to remind you, we're speaking to Brother Abiola Sow of Nation Kamit. The subject is the fight against neo-colonialism. Sisters and brothers, Tendai Mwari. This is part of the Alkebu-Lan Mosiah season online session, sisters and brothers. Tendai.
Could I read something from Baba Cabral?
Mm-hmm.
In relation to our previous conversation, yeah. So he has an excellent essay. I think it was originally a speech that he delivered sometime in the early 70s called National Liberation and Culture. It's an excellent piece of work. Looking at the revolutionary role that culture plays within a liberation movement. And interestingly enough, one of the subheadings is entitled The Class Character of Culture, yeah. And I say this might be informative, yeah, whether one agrees with everything necessarily. But he says the experience of colonial domination shows that in an attempt to perpetuate exploitation, the colonizer not only creates a whole system of repression of the cultural life of the colonized people, but also provokes and develops the cultural alienation of a part of the population, either by supposed assimilation of indigenous persons or by the creation of a social gulf between the aboriginal elites and the mass of the people. As a result, this process of division or of deepening the divisions within the society, it follows that a considerable part of the population, notably the urban or peasant petty bourgeoisie, assimilates the colonizer's mentality and regards itself as culturally superior to the people to which it belongs and whose cultural values it ignores or despises. This situation, characteristic of the majority of colonized intellectuals, is crystallized to the extent that the social privileges of the assimilated or alienated group are increased with direct implications for the behavior towards the liberation movement by individuals in this group. A spirit of reconversion of mentalities is thus seen to be vital for their true integration in the liberation movement. Such reconversion, re-Africanization in our case, may take place before the struggle, but is completed only during the course of the struggle through daily contact with the mass of the people and the communion of sacrifices which the struggle demands. Yeah. And so again, it's an excellent full essay. I'd encourage anybody to read it. But I think what I get from that is that even where class is concerned, the fundamental contradiction is that of culture and cultural allegiance. Yeah. In the sense of the fact that culture provides the people. Brother Libanaka talks about natural and informed will. Yeah, the natural and informed desire of a people is informed by their cultural inclinations, if that makes sense. Especially if, as he says in the essay, a colonization or oppression is to retard or seek to destroy the cultural life, which is the productive force of the people.
Then right. Yes, thank you for that. Sisters and brothers, just to let you know, you can still post comments or questions in the chat and join us with the link that's also in the chat directly as we head towards our close tonight. as I said, we're dealing with the situation, the issue, the subject, the topic is the fight against neo-colonialism. Our brother Abiola is with us, dealing with this subject. Tenamai and the coming threat. Tenamai, Sister Kai.
Yeah, Tenamai, just to say that Brother Leader is listening in. Unfortunately, he's been unable to join the panel. We've got some technical difficulties, but he would like to share some closing words. So just let us know when you're ready. Okay, he'll come in my slot.
All right, Tenamai.
Tenamai.
Yeah, just to say the serious word sound that Brother Shekara just read, Amakaka Brown, available in Return to the Source. Set this speeches from Amakaka Brown, serious book system, brother. If you can get it, get it. Yeah, the revolutionary theory is something which seems to be that doesn't guide a lot of us. And this is a season of Mosiah, Papa Garvey, and I think the point Sister Kai did make is there's very much a movement, an industry designed to really de-emphasize the intellectual force of Garveyism and the Garvey movement. And Marcus Garvey himself, and I think Sister Guy did emphasize, he was an intellect equal to anybody, any of his contemporaries, and it's manifested in a work that he produced. Because he couldn't stumble into creating a mass movement that was on the verge of freeing our people by accident.
Exactly.
You don't do those kind of things just by being a buffoon, as they wanted to, or by being a lunatic or a traitor. You can't achieve those things of one having an insight, that ancestral guidance and foresight to create these things, bring them into being, that one can galvanize our people. Because there are plenty of fine intellects. We've got fine words and written fine essays, and have moved nobody to action. That's really going to be the test of actually what you do and what you say and what theory you advance is who it moves, sisters and brothers. And Papa Garvey was really preeminent in that regard.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I also want to emphasize that the most powerful intellectual tool are also the most simple expressed, and the most simple to understand. So, for example, when Garvey says that power is the only thing that satisfies man, I think it's everything there is everything in that phrase. You see, because you can just take that phrase and analyze every part of human activity, African activity, and ask the question: does doing this thing help us get power or detract power from us? You see, and every situation can be analyzed from that simple phrase. Do we need to speak foreign languages? Okay, let's take Papa Garvey words. Power is the most important thing. Does speaking French give us power? No, it gives power to the French. Okay, let's take spirituality. Does being Muslim or practicing any other religion, foreign, give power to the Africans or gives power to the people who invented this religion? The answer is obvious. And you see, this simple phrase can be used as a political program for everything. So, and that is where we see the genius of this man.
Yeah, thanks. But let me just pick up on that last point, because we've got a question here by Sister Kindaya Barashango Kim, and she says, what role does African spirituality play in Kamitism in terms of moving us forward as a people? So give thanks for that question, my sister, Brother Abiola.
Asante, African spirituality is at the core of Kamitism, and the idea is that African spirituality is not just about praying and expecting things to come from the sky. African spirituality is our worldview and is the way we organize our personal life, our community life, and our national life. So if we take the spiritual concept of Mayat, it's on the personal level. So there are those 42 commandments of Mayat. They are not really commandments, but they are things that you have to not do in order to be a correct person and have a safe passage to the ancestors. So those are things at a personal level that you have to do. And so on the moral level, on the personal level, African spirituality has an answer. Then on the communal level, on the societal level, on the national level, there is also an answer, because Mayat is not simply a personal thing, it's the order of a society, is truth in the society, is justice in the society. And in the pharaonic state, the role of a mission of a pharaoh, of the king, was to ensure that Mayat was everywhere in the realm. So the people in the administrations couldn't be corrupt, because it would be against Mayat. There couldn't be a civil war, because it would be against Mayat. There couldn't be a shortage of food, because it will be against Mayat. There couldn't be people with sickness everywhere and a non-existent health system, public health system, it will be against Mayat. So you can see how having this spiritual system give you an answer on how you should run your society, your government, and should inspire your political program. And there is even a deeper level of Mayat. It is at the cosmic level, because we were saying that this was not just something for humans, you see, it was something for the whole living things in this planet, and it was also something that was regulating all the universe, you see. So the basic principle of Mayat was running from the personal level to the universal planetary level. And this is how we see it, is that everything that we do, and especially in politics, has to be informed by our spiritual worldview that is the best in the world.
Ashe.
But brother, we're going to come to our close very soon. So, Brother Shakaraz, anything you wanted to add? Well, what I'm going to do is go to Brother Abiola for closing comments. I'm going to say a few things, and Sister Kai will lead us out with the closing goes from Brother Leader. Tendamari.
Brother Olatunji? Okay, all right, sorry. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, no, it's okay.
Yeah, that's it. So, Brother Shakar, if you had anything to add?
No, I did want to just affirm what Mama Kai had said earlier in terms of this idea of kind of minimizing or reducing the sophistication of the race first analysis. And so as Garveyites, we have some work to do in terms of combating that particular kind of propaganda, because you speak to some brothers and sisters who are on the left, and they have this impression that race first analysis guides people to support Barack Obama, for example. And so there's some work to be done in terms of crystallizing the race first analysis and political and cultural inclination in that regard. And there's enough work out there, but maybe just in terms of our propagation of that work, more needs to be done. And so we look forward to doing that work and engaging that process and proliferating this concept of scientific Garveyism or African fundamentalism for our people worldwide. Tendamari.
Because people of science,
That's right. That's right.
Right, I can't see no questions. So, Brother Abiola, just any closing words from yourself? Would you want to say on behalf of the entire Alkebu-Lan Bible movement, just give a massive tetenda, majestic papa for the message this evening? Just give thanks and praises for being on our platform. We hope we got much from it. We hope those who are listening in did get much from it, and we want to really use this as a basis for moving forward to strengthen those links in the Pan-African world and the Garveyite world. Tendamari, Brother Abiola.
Tendamari.
Mori, Asante Sana, give thanks. I just want to, since we are in the month of Mosiah, just to end with a quote from Marcus Garvey. The enemy may argue with you to show you the impossibility of a free and redeemed Africa. But I want you to take as your argument 13 colonies of America that once owed their sovereignty to Great Britain. That sovereignty has been destroyed to make the United States of America. George Washington was not God Almighty. He was a man like any Negro in this building, and if he and his associates were able to make a free America, we too can make a free Africa. Hamden, Gladstone, Pitt, and Disraeli were not the representatives of God in the person of Jesus Christ. They were but men, but in their time they worked for the expansion of the British Empire, and today they boast of a British Empire upon which the sun never sets. As Pitt and Gladstone were able to work for the expansion of the British Empire, so you and I can work for the expansion of a great African empire. Voltaire and Mirabeau were not Jesus Christ. They were but men like ourselves. They worked and overturned the French monarchy. They worked for the democracy which France now enjoys. And if they were able to do that, we are able to work for a democracy in Africa. Lenin and Trotsky were not Jesus Christ, but they were able to overthrow the despotism of Russia. And today they have given to the world a social republic, the first of its kind. If Lenin and Trotsky were able to do that for Russia, you and I can do that for Africa. I think we can do it.
We can do it. We shall do it.
Ashe.
And right, give thanks, brother Abiola. Hail him, brother. Hail him. Right. And just to say, we've got brother leader, our spiritual leader, brother leader Bandaka's in the house. Just before I go to brother leader, just to say, sisters and brothers, you have been hosted by the Alkebu-Lan Driveless Movement. This is part of our Mosiah season, sisters and brothers. If you did miss part of the session, you can go to our YouTube page, Alkebu-Lan Way, and watch the entirety of tonight's session, as well as our previous sessions. Our last session, Sister Kaya Mambo Ama on feminism versus African nationalist womanhood, and the previous session, the Sabbath before that, Brother Ifayomi Grant on African powernomics. Going forward, sisters and brothers, we have a few more Mosiah sessions to go. Brother Abiola talked about the brainwashing going on in Africa. Well, we have the de-brainwashing station here, galaxyfewe.com. We have an Africa Speak show next Kuchugulia evening, next Monday evening, and we're dealing with the subject of African spiritual autonomy. That'll be 8 p.m. British summer time till 10 p.m. with our special guest, Sister Chenzira Kahina. Please, if you can, check that out, sisters and brothers. And this time, next Sabbath, next strong, the 25th of Mosiah, 7 p.m., Education for Liberation, featuring Queen Thais, the Queen of Black Homeschooling and founder and CEO of Liberated Minds Black Homeschool and Education Institute. So that's our ongoing sessions. If you miss any Mosiah session online, go to our Alkebu-Lan Way. If you miss any of our Mosiah sessions on Galaxy Radio, you can go to our Mixcloud page, Alkebu-Lan, and listen again to those shows, sisters and brothers. So we give thanks for you joining us this evening. Give thanks for all those who tuned in, all those who sent questions and comments, and we pray that you join us again on Galaxy on the 23rd of 24th of Mosiah, next Monday, Kujugulia Day, and on the 25th right here again for another online session. On that note, sisters and brothers, we're going to hand over to our spiritual leader, Brother Leader Bandaka. We've talked about the Mosiah season. Mosiah season came out of the vision of this warrior, intellect, activist, organizer. It was a message that he delivered in the year so-called 1997, where he decreed that the community needs to organize and observe and celebrate the life and legacy of Marcus Mosiah Garvey for a whole month. And that said, the following year, 1998, we established in the community the Mosiah season. From that day until now, Mosiah season has grown and grown to an international repute. Africans around the world are renaming this month that they call August. We call it Mosiah, Sisters and Brothers. The brother leader is a leader for our time, a visionary of great international renown. And he's going to give us his closing words on comment tonight, sisters and brothers. So let me hand over to our spiritual leader, Brother Leader Bendeka. Brother Leader Bendeka. Garvey lives.
Garvey lives.
Mosiah lives.
Mosiah lives. You live. Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari.
And I'm ready.
What's going on?
Brother Leader appears to have frozen. So I'll drop him out until he sorts that out. Yeah, you're on mute, Uncle Tunji.
You want to send some love out to the brothers and sisters of Nation Kamit as well in Paris and in Motherland. We know they're serious brothers and sisters, and we saw the measure of that work by what Brother Abiola delivered to us this evening, sisters and brothers. So certainly we do know that this fight is a global fight, and we need to make these links, concrete links, operational links between activists wherever we are, sisters and brothers. I said earlier, we talk about no personal friends but permanent interests, and we need something. And we see it oftentimes in global geopolitics. We need to apply it within our community itself, sisters and brothers, because the reality is we may not always like each other. We have to acknowledge our interdependent interests as African people to be free. So we need to work on the basis of those permanent interests of African liberation, of a free and redeemed Africa. Tendai Mwari. Right.
Waiting for Brother to come back. He's not back yet, so we'll work on it.
Okay.
Yeah, you know.
So just to remind sisters and brothers again, next Congo Day, want to hail up the Galaxy management indeed for creating the ODD Brainwashing Station under the leadership of Chief Congo Bro and the management of Baba Hirokuti, Dr. Abu, Sister Shanice, Nico de Mufro, and Muta Anu as well. We've been doing these sessions on Mosiah. Like I said earlier, yesterday we dealt with Brother Chief Fode Mantarai, Sister Kenya Mantarai in Sierra Leone, showing the scope of the work. Previously, we had Brother Tristan Samuels who contribute this evening, based in the USA, looking at the role of scholarship in African liberation. So surely when Brother Shakara spoke about the need for us to put our race first analysis up front and center, I'm sure Brother Tristan is going to be one of the warriors going to contribute into that work and that dynamic. Certainly based on what he was saying on the show on Galaxy Radio on the 10th of this month, and that's going to be up on our Mixcloud page very, very soon, sisters and brothers. It looks like we've got our brother leader back with us, sisters and brothers. So without further ado, I'm going to hand back to brother leader once he takes his seat, and he can take us forward. See, Babylon can't stop the powers, brother leader. They try it, but they can't stop it.
Tendai Mwari.
Tendai Mwari.
Well, let me move as quickly as I possibly can before we have any more misfortunes. But apologies for not being able to be visibly present throughout the evening. I was certainly listening in. I didn't hear all of the message, but efforts were being made to link me up so I could be, as I said, visibly present. But I do want to take this opportunity to profoundly and wholeheartedly not just thank but hail our brother Abiola for this absolutely awesome message that you have delivered to the African world community through this gathering this evening, where you have rightly, my beloved brother, as we have sought to do as a movement in 33 years of our existence, to give or provide, continue the legacy of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency, by continuing to give our people a purely authentic African-centered analysis of African realities, a purely authentic African-centered perspective of the world in which we live, our place in that world, and how forces in that world impacts on Africa and African humanity, African civilization. What is so powerful about your presentation, my beloved brother, is the centrality and with which you have treated culture and African spirituality, and presenting that as a central prerequisite for the empowerment and liberation of African people. And if we understand life, if we understand nature, if we understand human nature, we as an African people will realize that we are always going to be at our most powerful when we can see ourselves in, or see ourselves in the Creator and see the Creator in ourselves. In so doing, we realize and recognize our own divinity. Nothing can be more powerful than seeing the divinity of oneself, than expressing and celebrating the divinity of oneself. And that's why the reclamation of our African spirituality is so important. We have a great African scholar by the name of Baba Yusuf Ben Yochanan, who says religion is the deification of a people's culture. Therefore, religion empowers the people in whose culture the religion is expressed. Religion is the deification of a people's culture. So when we are practicing religions that are created and expressed in and out of the cultural vessels, as Baba Yusuf, John Henry Clark would put it, out of the cultural vessels of alien peoples, we are actually deifying them. We're elevating them to the realm of deities, and we find ourselves worshiping them, worshiping their image. We must see ourselves in the Creator and the Creator in ourselves. We must see divinity in ourselves. And you have really rooted that point in your presentation this evening, my beloved brother. And that is so awesome. I'm not going to be long, but I want to just touch just a couple, very quickly, a couple of salient points. If we are going to make an accurate analysis of neocolonialism on the African continent, we better understand the impact of the Ma'afa on the African continent and on African people. The psychological, the emotional, the spiritual impact of this vicious, evil force of white supremacy and European imperialism, and its impact on Africa and African people. The great Amilcar Cabral, name slipped me, Frantz Fanon, talks about the psychopathology of colonialism and the psychopathological effects of colonialism on African people. I'm sure you're familiar with the book, Brother Abiola, Black Skin, White Mask.
Yes.
Where he explains the feelings of dependency and inadequacy that Africans experience within the context of colonialism, where he speaks of the divided self-perception, and that the loss of a native culture and imbibing an alien culture, the culture of the oppressor, creates in African people. He talks about the deep inferiority complex that is engendered, and hence, when we as African people try to appropriate and internalize the culture of the colonizer. This is such a pernicious effect on us as African people. And then he talks about how this is most evident in upwardly mobile, educated Africans who can afford to acquire the status symbol. Now, if we're going to talk about, and it's very, very important that we understand, for example, let me just give an example. I'm trying to move very quickly, so let me just give an example very quickly. If we're going to talk about Robert Mugabe as a petty bourgeoisie, or petty bourgeois, let us look at Robert Mugabe's life. Let us look at his upbringing, being raised in a Jesuit seminary, being raised and being his brain being pounded with white supremacy, white Catholicism. Let us talk about, when we look at even Bokassa, as terrible, a leader as he was, as terrible a sellout as he was. It was far more complex than that. We need to know, we need to understand that his father, and I found it very interesting, my brother, when you talked about him calling De Gaulle daddy. How many of our people know that his father was murdered by the French colonial police? His father was resisting against French colonialism in the Central African Republic. He's actually a first cousin to Buganda. They're actually first cousins. And his father is Buganda's uncle. And he was employed by the French colonial system to use African people in some French colonial company. And when he refused to exploit, to allow the exploitation to continue, he was arrested in prison and publicly executed, beaten to death publicly. Then his mother committed suicide because of the trauma of her husband's murder. Then Bokassa became an orphan and was sent again to this Christian institution, to be raised in this Christian institution. He was abused in this Christian institution.
Powerful point, powerful point.
He was taunted because he was an orphan. He was taunted because he was black. He was taunted because he was short, right? And he was brutalized. And I wonder, when you said that he used to call De Gaulle daddy, whether he was highlighting the fact to De Gaulle that I know you killed my daddy. Whether he was using reverse psychology on De Gaulle. You know he fell out of favor with the French. And you know he established himself as what you call it? Emperor.
An emperor.
Right? As emperor. Okay? Which went against French orders. Right? If we don't know the background, we may not understand that there's something far more complex going on there. Buganda's mother was also murdered by the vicious French colonials. His mother was also murdered. we have to do an African study and analysis of the impact of colonialism on African people, and how these African leaders with these colonial mentalities, how they were manufactured. We can't just simply use Marxists, and I say this with the utmost love and respect, we can't just simply use Marxist terminologies. Some of them are not very helpful at all. If Robert Mugabe is simply petty bourgeois, he's a very unusual petty bourgeois. He's not the type of, let's take for instance, the fact that Mugabe, when his transformation came then, when he came back into Zimbabwe, he traveled out to Zimbabwe and returned into Zimbabwe in the early 90s, or early to mid 90s. And when he was confronted at the airport by war veterans who had had enough of waiting for the land redistribution, and who at the airport tell him, you had to make a decision. You had to make a decision here or no. Now, Mugabe was put in a position where he could either side with the neo-colonial masters and unleash the machinery of the state against the war veterans and those who were supporting the war veterans, or he could have sided with the war veterans and say, okay, I'm going to activate the land redistribution program. And we know, not just by what has been said by supporters of Mugabe, we have spoken to a range of people from Zimbabwe who confirm that ordinary families benefited from the redistribution program, the land redistribution program. 365,000 families benefited from the land redistribution program.
To emphasize, brother, you said families, not people. Families.
Families.
Say the number again. Say the number again.
365,000 families benefited from the redistribution program. And if you want to know what that means in terms of people, multiply that by 8. Because the average at that time was 8 person per family. Average.
Tell my brother, just to add as well, that the land reclamation program actually was delayed at the request of Azania, South Africa.
Yes.
Because they were going through some negotiations with the Anglo Boers at the time, and they feared that a move in Zimbabwe would adversely affect those negotiations. So even then, so Thabo Mbeki asked personally Baba Mugabe to delay their program so that they could see those negotiations through. Because obviously, Africa, Azania is a regional powerhouse.
Absolutely. I mean, Robert Mugabe went to Ghana to study and then to work, and lived in Ghana for a period of time, precisely because he wanted to live under Nkrumah's Ghana, learn under Nkrumah's Ghana, be influenced, put himself at the service of Ghana in a way that he could also learn and grow. Mugabe was part of a force that waged military resistance against the colonial forces in Zimbabwe, and was refusing to give up the armed resistance, but for the fact that the frontline states pressured him into giving up the armed resistance, including South Africa.
Pressured him under the influence of America.
Yes, Mozambique, Tanzania, all of those, Kenya, all of those frontline states pressured him into giving up the armed resistance, which he would not have been able to sustain without their support. So there's more to, I think if we just reduce Mugabe, which kind of sound phonetically very close to Mosiah Garvey, but anyway, if we just reduce him to a petty bourgeoisie. We have not properly and fully informed ourselves, and we have fallen short of a proper systems analysis to inform and educate our people. Let me say very quickly, and I'll round up. What's the name of that editor, Brother Olatunji, of the New African, Ankoma?
Bafo Ankoma.
Bafo Ankoma says that he used to be very critical of African presidents until he started to really study them. All right, and don't get me wrong, no, neocolonialism is a serious problem on the African continent. Yeah, the compromises that we see from the so-called leaders that are in nations today on the African continent is indeed very, very worrying and very distressing, but we need a proper analysis of how they got there. And we need to remember that we had emerged in the 60s and 70s with powerful, progressive African leaders. Almost every single one of them were displaced, either assassinated or exiled, the governments overthrown, government personnel killed or put in prison. We could do a long roll call of the African leaders because they had an agenda that did not suit the agenda of the neo-colonial forces of Europe. Yes? And then puppet regimes were put in their place to serve the interests of Europe. And you've dealt with that anyway, my brother, Abiola. I don't want to, duplicate what you've done, because you did an excellent job this evening. But I just want to remind us. The final point I wanted to make was about this book that was written by Malidoma Some of Water and of Spirit, where he talked about his experience of colonialism. He was snatched from his family, from his home, his family home, from his village. And he was incarcerated, you have to say, in a Jesuit seminary.
Age 4.
Huh?
It's age 4.
Age 4. Yes. And he was sexually abused, physically abused, racially, mentally abused, until he ran away, age 20, was it, Brother Olatunji? Age 20 or so? He eventually ran away. And when he tells you the extent to which these vicious, evil vampires, the extent to which they would go to destroy the minds and souls of African children, to the extent that they were forbidden from using their names, speaking their native language. And if they did, they were whipped. They were abused in all kinds of ways, including tying the the decomposing head of a dead animal around their necks. And their duty would be to snoop and to see anyone who would use an African word or use their proper African name. And they had to snitch on that person in order to have this decomposing carcass removed from around their necks. These are children now. And what do you think happened if nobody was seen or heard using an African language or using their African names? They would lie on them or trick them into saying an African word. Yes, these are the realities of why we have the kind of leaders that we have on the African continent today. And we have to factor this. We can't just use Marxism. Marxism does only assists us to a certain degree. Papa Garvey says, hear all but attend only to that which concerns you. Marxism is not going to give us the analysis that we need to truly understand the impact, the psychological and emotional impact of colonialism on Africa and African people. Read a book called Chasing Gods Not Our Own. Author's name is Bengo. First name is me. Read that book, because that book goes into some powerful analysis that helps us to read Baba Chinwezu's Decolonizing the African Mind, because that's what we're going to have to deal with here, the decolonizing of the African mind. And we have to understand that is the restoration, the rescue, the restoration and the reconstruction of our African culture and our African spirituality that is at is a fundamental need for African people in this time. I thank you, my beloved brother, for your excellent, powerful presentation this evening. I close with the words of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. So much in what you said, my brother. So much, so much. Please continue your work, and I look forward to us building closer and closer relationship, working relationship with you and your organization. All right, more power to you, my brother. I really, I love you, my brother. Not just your work. I love you, my brother. I see and feel my liberation. In you, I feel hope for my people. So, with the words of Papa Garvey, unite, organize now or perish. Rise, you mighty African people, for you can accomplish whatever you will. Rumbidzo kunamwari Africa, to the God of Africa be the glory. Tendai Mwari.
Right, give thanks. Right, just going to go over to Sister Kai now to give us our closing words for this evening.
Sister Kai. For assisting us through a very important and informative and analytical discussion that we can go away with now and re-watch again on our YouTube channel, Alkebu-Lan Way, decipher, take some notes, and come back again. Brother Abiola Sow, thank you again as well for blessing us this Mosiah season. It's been a pleasure having you, and we send all our love and blessings to you and your organization. Tetenda Shakara, once again, for assisting in a really important discussion this afternoon with your questions and your analysis. Sister and brother, just to remind us that the Alkebu-Lan Academy of Excellence online, if you have children aged 3 to 16 and would like to join our Saturday program, then you can call 07908 814-152. I think we will probably put in the chat for me. And our food relief program, we're looking for volunteers to assist us with packaging food or delivering food every Wednesday to our elderly and vulnerable families. I just want to place, of course, Brother Leader Bandaka, for your closing comments and your, again, a very important analysis and helping us to look at the whole picture holistically when we are making criticisms of our people. Criticism that might be well justified, we need to be able to look at the full picture, how these things have come about. Because until we understand how these things have come about, we won't know how to dismantle it or to stop it. So we give thanks again. Tendai Mwari. I ask brothers and sisters to place your left hand on your heart, raise your right hand, or assume a posture of reverence. Let us remind ourselves to take from here all that we've learned, all that we've gained in knowledge, information, and inspiration out into the streets, into our personal lives, amongst our families and friends, our places of work, our places of study, wherever we are. Let us remind ourselves to be a shining light unto Africans everywhere.
Yes.
Let Africans everywhere know that Mwari, Olodumare, Nkulunkulu, Nodume, Sudume, Ama, Eshe, Nobokuane, the African God, reigns
supreme.
Let Africans everywhere know that it is a joy
To be an African.
Let Africans everywhere know that liberation
is indeed at hand.
Tendamwari.
God believes. God believes.
God believes.
Tendamwari, kings and queens. Tendamwari.